Chapter 1703. Tang Hai grabbed the young man and returned to Qin Feiyang's side. The black-clothed old man's face darkened and he shouted, "Let him go! If I let him go just because you said so, how can I give you face? Actually, I've already given you enough face. Because at first I didn't make a move, and I even respectfully called you senior. But what about you? Taking advantage of your seniority and arrogance. I want to ask, who the hell are you? How dare you be so arrogant in front of me?" Qin Feiyang sneered. This merciless humiliation made the black-clothed old man's face turn green and red. He said word by word, "Young man, don't be too arrogant." "Arrogant? I'm still considered low-key. You didn't see when I was even more arrogant." Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully, looked at Tang Hai and said, "Give me your dagger." Tang Hai handed the dagger in his hand to Qin Feiyang. Divine weapon. The black-clothed old man stared at the dagger, and his eyes trembled slightly. With his eyesight, he could tell at a glance that this dagger was extraordinary. He finally realized that something was wrong. This time, he might have kicked an iron plate. Qin Feiyang took the dagger, glanced at the black-clothed old man, and said with a faint smile, "You said I'm arrogant, right? Then I'll show you." As soon as he finished speaking, he slashed at the young man's arm. The young man suddenly screamed, and his arm was cut off on the spot, and blood spurted out of the bowl-sized wound. The trapped undead also slipped out of his hand and fell to the ground. The young man roared, "How dare you cut off my arm? You're courting death." A cold light flashed in Tang Hai's eyes. He raised his other arm and slammed it on the young man's mouth. Crack. The young man's teeth were shattered on the spot. His mouth was also badly mutilated, and the pain was heart-wrenching. "You'd better shut up, or you won't even know how you died." Qin Feiyang looked at the young man contemptuously, then returned the dagger to Tang Hai. Then he bent down, picked up the imprisoned undead and asked, "Are you okay?" The undead struggled madly in the cage. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the black-clothed old man. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he said, "Let her go immediately." "You know her?" The black-clothed old man frowned. "No, I don't," Qin Feiyang said. "I don't know her. Why are you helping her?" The black-clothed old man didn't understand. "It's my pleasure. What can you do about it?" Qin Feiyang grinned. The black-robed old man's face was gloomy as he said, "You'd better figure out who is standing in front of you right now." "Really? Then tell me, who are you?" Qin Feiyang was curious. "An existence you can't afford to offend," the black-clothed old man said word by word. "Can't afford to offend him?" "Haha." Qin Feiyang laughed loudly, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, "Then I will also let you see the consequences of provoking me. Old Tang, cut off his other arm for me." "How dare you?" The black-clothed old man was furious. However, before his voice died away, the young man let out a painful scream. The other arm was cut off cleanly by Tang Hai. Then Tang Hai glanced at the black-clothed old man, his eyes full of ridicule. "Second grandpa, listen to him. Let the undead go." The young man roared. It was too late for regrets. How could he be so unlucky to meet two people who were as good as him? "You will pay the price." The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang with a grim expression. With a wave of his old arm, the cage was immediately shattered. The undead escaped and hid behind Qin Feiyang's back. "Let him go," the black-clothed old man shouted. "Let him go." Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth slightly and said with a smile, "Do you think I am an idiot? If I let him go, you will immediately attack us." "What do you want?" the black-clothed old man said in a deep voice. "Tell me, who are you? Why are you in the ancient world?" Qin Feiyang said. The black-clothed old man was stunned and said in surprise, "You are not from the ancient world. Is there a difference?" Qin Feiyang said calmly. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang's expression and said in a deep voice, "You are indeed not from the ancient world." Qin Feiyang said, "I didn't say that. This is just your wishful thinking. Stop pretending. What kind of people have I not seen? You want to pretend in front of me? You are still too young." The black-clothed old man sneered. Qin Feiyang revealed an astonished expression. "This old thing is quite perceptive." He smiled and said, "It seems that you won't tell me. If that's the case, I can only use my own methods to obtain the answer I want. Finished. He formed a seal with both hands. A puppet imprint appeared and entered the young man's head like lightning. Boom. But when the puppet imprint entered the young man's head and rushed to his soul, it seemed to have touched some taboo. A terrifying killing intent suddenly rushed out from the young man's soul. The puppet imprint shattered on the spot. Qin Feiyang's body trembled, and he suffered a backlash. The purple gold dragon blood in his mouth spurted out. What? It's actually the purple gold dragon blood. The black-clothed old man stared at the purple gold dragon blood in horror and roared. Who are you to Qin Batian? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned and said in surprise, How do you know Qin Batian? Boom. However, before he finished speaking, the killing intent in the young man's sea of consciousness suddenly emerged from between his eyebrows and rushed toward Tang Hai. At this moment, even Tang Hai felt the threat of death. Without any hesitation, he directly threw the young man away and took Qin Feiyang and the undead. He smashed the stone above the secret room with a punch, and rushed to the ground like lightning. The black-clothed old man quickly went forward and caught the young man. He asked, Jir, are you okay? I'm fine. Second Grandpa. We must not let them escape. The young man said resentfully. Don't worry, they can't escape. The black-clothed old man smiled and chased out like lightning. The killing intent also rushed into the young man's eyebrows and disappeared. Qin Feiyang. Tang Hai had already rushed to the ground with him, and the undead. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. Tang Hai, what was that? That was the killing intent of a war god. And the owner of that killing intent was stronger than that old man. According to my estimation, he was at least a war god in the Deshang stage. Tang Hai said. War god in the Deshang stage. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. Who were these people? What secrets were hidden in this ancient world? Why did they recognize the ancestor? The fire python said that the ancestor was directly forced to the third floor, and had never been to the ancient world. It was reasonable to say that the people here should not know the ancestor. What was going on? Boom. Just as Qin Feiyang was deep in thought, the black-clothed old man flew out from the ground with a murderous aura. Tang Hai's expression changed and he hurriedly said, Young master, this person's strength is unfathomable. We can't fight him head-on. What are you afraid of? Qin Feiyang smiled coldly and took out the ancient castle. I want to understand all of this. Cripple him for me. When Tang Hai saw the ancient castle, his confidence soared. Surrender immediately and I'll spare your lives. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai and shouted. His terrifying divine power rushed toward the two of them. I'll return this sentence to you word for word. Tang Hai smiled coldly and grabbed the ancient castle. His god power surged into the castle like a tide. Boom. The ancient castle suddenly released a shocking power. The black-clothed old man's body trembled, and he stared at the ancient castle in surprise. Tang Hai took a step forward and directly faced the black-clothed old man's divine power. The power of the ancient castle destroyed the world. With a boom, the divine power immediately collapsed. The black-clothed old man was dumbfounded. What kind of divine artifact was this? How could it contain such terrifying power? At this time, the young man also flew out. When he saw the ancient castle, an indescribable fear suddenly emerged in his heart. Even the guardian of the miracle doesn't dare to challenge the young master. Where did you borrow the courage from? With the ancient castle in hand, the world was mine. Tang Hai was in high spirits and unscrupulously charged toward the black-clothed old man. Guardian of the miracle. The black-clothed old man's face became even paler. He decisively turned around and fled with the young man. Qin Feiyang shouted, You must not let them escape. Yes. Tang Hai didn't even turn his head as he responded. His footsteps were strange as he chased after the two men. Although I obtained the treasure you left behind when you were alive, I also saved your life just now. We can be considered even. In the future, you're on your own. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the undead and said a few words. He then used the walk formula and chased after Tang Hai. The undead turned into a human figure, suspended in the void, as if watching Qin Feiyang's back. A moment later, The undead also turned into an afterimage and disappeared like lightning. His speed is really fast. In the sky above the desolate land, the black-clothed old man fled with the young man. The young man turned his head and looked at Tang Hai, who was chasing behind him, his face full of shock. The black-clothed old man said in a deep voice, "He should have mastered an extremely terrifying auxiliary divine art." "Then can we escape?" The young man panicked. "Of course." The black-clothed old man smiled contemptuously and said, "Although his speed is very fast, this old man is not to be trifled with." But that young man really surprised this old man. "Young man, you mean the person with the purple gold dragon blood?" The young man said. "Who else could it be? The purple gold dragon blood is the rarest bloodline power in the world. It is said that only the descendants of the purple gold divine dragon have such bloodline power," the black-clothed old man said. "The descendant of the purple gold divine dragon? Could it be that he is the child of the purple gold divine dragon and a human?" The young man said. "Most likely. Otherwise, how could he have the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood? Do you still remember that there was a person called Qin Batian?" The black-clothed old man said. "I remember. Although I was very young at that time, many people were talking about him," the young man said. "Qin Batian also has the bloodline power of the purple gold dragon blood. These two people must have an unusual relationship. This person is very likely to be the descendant of Qin Batian," the black-clothed old man said. "So what if he is the descendant of Qin Batian?" The young man was puzzled. "You don't understand. Those who have the purple gold dragon blood have extraordinary talent, and are all people with great luck. As long as they don't die prematurely, they will become great people. The most important thing is that when Qin Batian entered the ancient world, he offended many people. As the saying goes, the son pays the father's debt. If that person is really the descendant of Qin Batian, we can use him to achieve our goal." Chapter 1704. What purpose? The young man was surprised. The black-robed old man shook his head and said, "You are too weak now. There are some things you should not know. I am already a 9-star combat emperor at the peak of the martial emperor realm. I am 1 step away from the pseudo-god realm. Is this still too weak?" The young man was not convinced. Is a 9-star combat emperor at the peak of the martial emperor realm that great? Do you know how long that young man has been cultivating? According to this old man's observation, he has only cultivated for 100 or 200 years at most, but he has already stepped into the pseudo-god realm. Compared to him, you are still far behind. So don't be complacent. There are many people who are stronger than you. The black-robed old man reprimanded mercilessly. The young man pursed his lips and said, "He has the power of the purple gold dragon blood. Of course he is faster than me." "That's not the point. Forget it. You have too little experience. You might not be able to understand some things even now." After the black-robed old man finished speaking, the divine light under his feet surged, and his speed suddenly soared. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Tang Hai's sight. Tang Hai raised his eyebrows and stopped decisively. Soon, Qin Feiyang caught up, glanced at the void and asked, "Where is he?" "That old man's cultivation is higher than mine, and he also cultivated an auxiliary divine art. I can't catch up." Tang Hai shook his head. "Damn it." Qin Feiyang cursed secretly. Tang Hai bowed and said, "Young master, please punish me. This is not your fault. Why should I punish you?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him, glanced around the land and murmured, "This ancient world is really an interesting place." "I don't find it interesting. I just feel that danger is everywhere," Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyang was speechless. He looked at Tang Hai and said, "I am really curious. What kind of face is under your mask?" Tang Hai instinctively touched the mask below. It was broken? He was stunned. Then he remembered that it seemed to have broken when the third elder exploded. He immediately turned around, took out a brand new mask, and put it on his face. From the beginning to the end, he did not let Qin Feiyang see his real face. "You are not a woman. Why are you hiding it?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Tang Hai said, "My appearance is too scary. I'm afraid I'll scare you." "Lame excuse." Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. Tang Hai did not seem to want to continue discussing this issue. He asked, "What are we going to do next?" "Wait. That old man knows the ancestor. When he sees that I also have purple gold dragon blood, he will definitely connect me to the ancestor. I think that if nothing unexpected happens, he will come looking for me again. However, the next time you come looking for me, there should be a large group of experts around you. Are you afraid?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Tang Hai looked at the castle in his hand and shook his head. Qin Feiyang smiled and took back the ancient castle from Tang Hai's hands. Then he took out the Qianquan bag and the axe. "This axe is definitely not simple," Tang Hai said. "Check your cosmos sack." Qin Feiyang threw the cosmos sack to Tang Hai, then cut the tip of his index finger. Drops of purple gold dragon blood dripped onto the axe. However, the axe did not absorb the purple gold dragon blood. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Was this really just an ordinary axe? Because only in this way could it not be bound by blood. But earlier, the axe had indeed been able to easily cut through his skin. Tang Hai looked up at Qin Feiyang and said, "There are only some medicinal materials, elixirs, and gold coins in this cosmos sack." "Nothing else?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "No." Tang Hai shook his head. But his expression suddenly froze and he said, "Wait." Immediately after, he took out a jade box from the cosmos sack. The jade box was the size of a palm, dull in color, simple and unadorned. It looked extremely ordinary. However, Tang Hai, on the other hand, sensed a dense and mysterious energy from the jade box. He glanced at Qin Feiyang and opened the jade box. Boom! Immediately, a majestic energy roared out of the jade box. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai immediately felt as if they were bathing in a sea of essence. The pores all over their body opened involuntarily, and they felt extremely comfortable. The two lowered their heads and looked at the things in the jade box, their eyes full of surprise. Inside the jade box, there was a crystal stone lying quietly. The crystal stone was the size of a baby's fist. It was gray all over and exuded a hazy glow. That energy was emitted from this crystal stone, and the energy emitted by the crystal stone was full of divine essence. "What is this?" Tang Hai was suspicious. "I don't know. I've never seen it before." Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "But this energy seems to be absorbable." After the energy entered his body, he could clearly feel that it merged with the soul in his sea of consciousness. It can be absorbed. This energy seems to have the same effect as the spirit congealing pill. It can condense divine sense. No. To be exact, the energy is purer and more amazing than the spirit congealing pill. Tang Hai said. Qin Feiyang was taken aback and asked, "You mean this crystal stone is used for cultivation?" "It should be." Tang Hai took out the gray crystal stone and held it in the palm of his hand. Immediately, the energy in the crystal stone surged into his body. His body trembled slightly, and he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "I'm sure that this is used for cultivation, and the effect is better than the spirit congealing pill. I estimate that the energy contained in this crystal stone is comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns." This, Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Tang Hai was talking about the spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. As an alchemist, he naturally knew what the concept of 5 or 6 patterns was. The energy contained in this crystal stone was actually comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 patterns. This was too surprising. What kind of treasure was it? Qin Feiyang took the crystal stone from Tang Hai's hand, and the majestic divine energy suddenly poured into his body, passing through his limbs and bones, and finally gathered in his sea of consciousness and poured into his soul. Sure enough, as Tang Hai said, the energy contained in the crystal stone was amazing and terrifying. And there were no impurities at all, and it was extremely pure. Even in this short period of time, 3 strands of divine sense were born in his sea of consciousness. Qin Feiyang reluctantly put the gray crystal stone into the jade box, and looked at Tang Hai and said, "See if there are any more such crystal stones in your Qianquan bag?" Tang Hai nodded, and after a careful search, he shook his head and said, "No, this is the only one." Such a magical treasure should be something that can only be encountered by chance. Qin Feiyang sighed. Not necessarily. It's very magical in our eyes, but it may be just an ordinary thing in the eyes of others. After all, our understanding of the war god and above is too shallow. Why don't we look for it again? If we're lucky, maybe we can find a few relics left by the war god. Tang Hai suggested. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. If there were relics, there might be this magical gray crystal stone. However, what was the deal with this axe? Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at the axe. The edge of the axe was covered by rust, but it was certain that this was definitely a divine object. But why couldn't it recognize its owner by blood? Qin Feiyang's mind was full of doubts. He simply stopped thinking about it, put away the axe and looked around. Let's go over there and look. Qin Feiyang pointed in the direction of the old man in black. First, look for the relics. Second, wait for the old man in black. Killing two birds with one stone. Swish. But suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of the two. It's you? Qin Feiyang was surprised. The one who came was the undead from before. Tang Hai looked at the undead warily and asked, "Why are you following us? What's your intention?" The undead was silent. You don't want to say? Tang Hai's eyes suddenly surged with killing intent. The undead waved her hand, turned around without saying a word, and rushed to the west. What do you mean? Tang Hai was stunned. Qin Feiyang guessed. Look at her. She should be taking us somewhere. Tang Hai frowned and said, We'd better stay away from this kind of damn thing. Qin Feiyang was stunned, looked at Tang Hai with a strange look, and said, Can I understand that you are afraid of the undead? How is that possible? I am the god of war. Why would I be afraid of a mere undead? Tang Hai said angrily. You confessed without being pressed. If you are not afraid, why are you so agitated? Qin Feiyang smiled jokingly. Tang Hai lowered his head in embarrassment. Well, although the undead is an ominous thing, this one seems to have no malice. Let's follow and have a look. Qin Feiyang smiled. Okay. Tang Hai nodded. He could only bite the bullet, otherwise he would definitely be laughed at by Qin Feiyang. Tang Hai waved his hand and quickly caught up with the undead with Qin Feiyang. But they always kept a distance. Time flew by. Night fell. The whole ancient world gradually fell into deep darkness. Tang Hai also lost his patience. He looked at the undead and said, Where are you taking us? The undead suddenly stopped. Tang Hai quivered and immediately stopped. He took Qin Feiyang and retreated a few steps. His expression was full of vigilance. The undead pointed to the left. Tang Hai and Qin Feiyang were stunned and looked in the same direction. Night shrouded the whole earth. There was dead silence all around. However, with the cultivation of Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai, they could clearly see through the darkness. And just a few hundred miles to the left, there was a huge valley. The valley was surrounded by mountains on three sides, towering into the clouds, and there was only one entrance. Looking from a distance, it was full of a mysterious and gloomy feeling. Qin Feiyang withdrew his gaze and looked at the undead, asking, The place you want to take us to is that valley? The undead nodded and continued to move forward. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other and immediately followed. But in the face of the unknown valley, Qin Feiyang also began to be vigilant. A few hundred miles was nothing for the three of them. Soon, they landed in front of the entrance of the valley. The undead directly took the two of them into the valley. The valley was very large, estimated to be a few miles, but like the outside, there was no grass, only desolation. The undead did not stop and went straight to the center of the valley, then lowered his head and stared ahead. Chapter 1705. The pool was very small, only 4 or 5 meters in diameter. However, the water in the pool was very strange. It was actually black. There were no waves in the water, like a dead pool, revealing a bit of strangeness. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other, walked to the pool, looked down for a moment, and found that the water was emitting an unusual stench. This stench went into the nostrils, making people feel dizzy. There's poison in the water. Qin Feiyang's face suddenly changed. Poison? Tang Hai was shocked, took a few steps back, picked up a stone under his feet, and threw it into the pool. Dong! Boom! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The tranquil pond immediately surged with waves. At the same time, a cold and fierce aura, like a volcano, erupted from the bottom of the pool. Tang Hai shouted, "Young master, retreat!" Qin Feiyang quickly retreated. But Tang Hai did not move, staring at the pool. The movement in the pool was getting louder and louder. The waves splashed. It was as if there was a terrible demon sealed in the pool, and at this moment, it was gradually awakening. Tang Hai became more and more vigilant. In the palm of his hand, divine power was surging, and he was already secretly accumulating power. Splash! Soon, as a column of water rose to the sky, a black shadow rushed out of the pool like lightning, going straight for Tang Hai's eyebrows. A strong sense of crisis swept over his heart. Tang Hai's eyes were cold, raised his arm, and slapped the black shadow. Ah! The black shadow immediately let out a shrill scream, and the figure suddenly collapsed. This is... Qin Feiyang's pupils contracted. The black shadow collapsed, and there was no flesh and blood. It was obviously another undead. Could it be? He looked at the pool and his eyes flashed. Could it be that there was also an ancient site left behind by the god of war under the pool? Hee. After the undead was defeated by Tang Hai's palm, it turned into a black mist that churned in the void. Release? The man's hideous laughter echoed in the night sky, like the roar of a ghost. Playing tricks, you're courting death. Tang Hai's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and divine power surged out, and the valley collapsed in an instant. It's a ghost, how can it be playing tricks? Qin Feiyang was speechless. But as soon as he spoke, he immediately attracted the undead's attention. The undead immediately avoided Tang Hai, and fiercely rushed towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was stunned and coldly shouted, "Do you think I'm easy to bully?" After saying that, he took out the ancient castle and smashed it on the ground. Ah! The undead wailed again and hurriedly fled in horror. However, at this moment, the female undead who had been standing motionlessly beside Qin Feiyang suddenly soared into the air and pounced at the undead. The two undead immediately became entangled in the void, but not long after. All the dead spirits in the pool were devoured by the female dead spirit. Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Tang Hai was also bewildered. The undead could actually devour the undead? Moreover, they also clearly sensed that after devouring the undead in the pool, the female undead's aura immediately increased. Although the improvement wasn't much, it was still there. In other words, the undead could become stronger by devouring other undead. Did you bring us here just to let us seriously injure this undead and give you a chance to devour it? Tang Hai raised his eyebrows. The undead shook its head. Then why? Tang Hai was suspicious. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "The reason is under the pool." Under the pool? Tang Hai was stunned. The undead also nodded and gave Qin Feiyang a thumbs up, as if to express its admiration for Qin Feiyang. Tang Hai looked at the pool again, and suddenly seemed to think of something. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said, "You mean there may also be an ancient site hidden in it?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Tang Hai's spirit was lifted. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the divine flame power emerged and poured into the pool. The water in the pool quickly evaporated. After a while, the bottom of the pool appeared in front of the two. The pool could be 50 or 60 meters deep. The bottom was full of mud, emitting a foul smell. A broken skeleton was lying quietly in the mud. The skeleton had obvious traces of decay. It was black and smelled foul. Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai entered the pool and stood above the skeleton. "That's not right. Why is this skeleton black?" Tang Hai was suspicious. "It's poison. This person must have been poisoned when he was alive. After he died, his body decayed, and the poison settled in his bones. Over time his bones turned black. I think the water in the pond turned black because of this deadly poison." Qin Feiyang said. "Could it be that I smelled an unusual stench in the water earlier? It seems like it was emitted by this poison." Tang Hai murmured. "Judging from the strength of the undead, this person must have been a war god when he was alive. Even a war god was poisoned to death. What kind of poison is this? It's so terrible." Qin Feiyang murmured. His heart was full of disbelief. A person at the level of a war god had already transcended the mortal world and was in existence above all things. Ordinary poisons could not pose a threat to them at all. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the female undead, wanting to get an answer from the female undead. But the female undead turned a blind eye to it. From the time they met until now, he had not seen her say a word. This made Qin Feiyang wonder if creatures like the undead could not speak. Seeing that the female undead did not respond for a long time, Qin Feiyang had to give up helplessly. Tang Hai walked around the skeleton for a while, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Immediately, he stretched out his arm, and his 5 fingers were like eagle claws, grabbing the air. Whoosh! Immediately, something covered in mud flew out of the mud. What's that? Qin Feiyang was curious. Tang Hai waved his hand again, and the mud was removed. A square iron box suddenly appeared in front of the two. Iron box. Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback, and was about to reach out to open the iron box. Don't move, Tang Hai hurriedly said. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang quickly retracted his arm and looked at him in surprise. There are also a lot of toxins on the surface of this iron black. You can't touch it with your hands. After Tang Hai said that, a wisp of divine power rushed towards the iron black. Then, with a slight movement of his fingers, the iron box opened with a clang. The moment Tai He opened the door, a majestic surge of energy surged out. This, Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked at each other. This energy was exactly the same as the energy emitted by the gray crystal. The two of them hurriedly lowered their heads to take a look, and their expressions immediately froze. Inside the iron black, there were actually 3 gray crystals. Whether it was the size or the color, they were the same as the gray crystal obtained in the ancient city. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses, turned to look at the undead, and asked, You brought us here for these crystals? The undead nodded. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Since you can understand what I'm saying, why don't you speak? Could it be that you were a mute when you were alive? The undead shook his head. If you're not a mute, then say something. This way, we can communicate better. Qin Feiyang said. The undead shook his head again. Qin Feiyang had a helpless look on his face. He really couldn't figure out what the undead was trying to say. While Qin Feiyang was asking the undead, Tang Hai also took out 3 gray crystals from the iron black. After confirming that these 3 crystals were not contaminated by toxins, he handed them to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang carefully put them away and looked at Tang Hai with a smile. Including the one from before, we already have 4, but it's far from enough. Yes. Tang Hai nodded. Although the energy contained in the gray crystals was extremely huge, 4 of them were not enough for Qin Feiyang to break through to the war god realm. Tang Hai pondered for a while, then looked at the undead and said, Do you know where there are more of these crystals? The undead nodded. Tang Hai and Qin Feiyang looked at each other with a hint of joy in their eyes. Tang Hai urged, Take us there at once. Ahem. Qin Feiyang coughed and looked at Tang Hai. Old Tang, the undead also have dignity. When you ask her for help, you should be more polite. Tang Hai rolled his eyes and snorted coldly. If it weren't for the fact that she still has some value, I would have killed her long ago. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. Couldn't he be more euphemistic? He looked at the undead, cupped his hands and smiled. Miss, I'm sorry, my friend's character is like this. Please don't take offense. Miss. Tang Hai was taken aback. He looked at Qin Feiyang with eyes full of contempt. The undead waved her hand to Qin Feiyang, rushed out of the pool without saying a word, and continued to rush forward. Keep up. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang hurriedly said to Tang Hai. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang, then waved his hand, rolled up Qin Feiyang, and chased after the undead. Qin Feiyang wondered, Did I annoy you? Why do you always roll your eyes at me? Don't you think it's against your will to call her miss? Tang Hai said. Against my will? Qin Feiyang was stunned and puzzled. Isn't this basic courtesy? What do you mean by against your will? Okay. Then let's discuss it. Let's not talk about whether she is an undead or not. Just by her age, you can imagine that she must be an old monster who has lived for who knows how many years. And in order to get more crystal stones, you actually called her miss. Aren't you ashamed? The contempt in Tang Hai's eyes was even stronger. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he looked quite embarrassed. What's wrong? You have nothing to say. Hypocrite. Tang Hai snorted coldly. Qin Feiyang smiled. But suddenly, he turned his head and looked at Tang Hai strangely. Tang Hai didn't feel anything at first, but after a long time, he felt uncomfortable all over. He frowned and said, "Why are you looking at me like that? I remember when I first met you. You were a man of few words. I even thought you were a mute. Why are you so talkative now?" Qin Feiyang said. Tang Hai was taken aback, and his expression immediately became indifferent. He coldly snorted and said, "I just don't like your way of doing things, so I said a few more words." Ahem. Anyway, you are my subordinate now. Pay attention to your words. Qin Feiyang said angrily. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at him again. Why don't I have any prestige at all? Qin Feiyang was quite helpless. In fact, in the beginning Tang Hai was still very afraid of Qin Feiyang. However, after getting along with him for a few days, he slowly found that this person was quite easygoing. At least, he was not so serious and harsh to the people around him. So, Chapter 1706. Next, under the guidance of the undead, Qin Feiyang found 5 more ancient ruins one after another. Among them, there were a total of 26 gray crystal stones, plus the original 4, there were 30 in total. In addition, he also obtained 2 divine artifacts. The 2 divine artifacts were both battle swords, but their level was not high, and they could be considered the most ordinary divine artifacts. As for medicinal pills, medicinal herbs, gold coins, and other treasures, there were naturally countless of them. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. Fire Python is not lying. This ancient world is really a place full of opportunities, Qin Feiyang said with a smile as he stood in the air above a mountain ridge and scanned the boundless earth. But don't you think it's strange? Why did the undead bring us to find these ancient ruins? Tang Hai glanced at the undead next to him and transmitted his voice. Maybe it's because she wants to devour other undead. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and secretly said, the 5 ancient ruins that they found these days basically all had undead. And in the end, they were all devoured by this female undead. Her aura was also getting stronger and stronger. I don't think it's that simple. She devoured those undead. It should just be an illusion to paralyze us. Tang Hai said. Illusion? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and curiously asked, then tell me, what is her real purpose? How would I know? Tang Hai glared at him angrily and then fell silent. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at the undead. Miss, let's continue. But the undead stared ahead motionlessly. Dozens of miles ahead, there was an endless mountain range. Layers upon layers of mountains, extremely steep. Some of the peaks were even more than 10,000 feet high, towering into the sky. What are you looking at? Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai looked up at the mountain range suspiciously. Suddenly, Tang Hai's eyes became extremely sharp, and he shouted, Who's hiding over there? Get out! There's someone? Qin Feiyang was surprised. He didn't notice at all. It seemed that the strength of the person in the dark was not simple. Whoosh! Not long after Tang Hai finished speaking, 2 figures flew out from a mountain stream and entered Qin Feiyang's line of sight, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air. There really is someone. Qin Feiyang was shocked. But then, his expression froze as he looked at one of them and said in surprise, It's you. That was an elder dressed in black clothes, holding a walking stick. His hair was white. That was right. It was the black-clothed old man who had appeared in the ancient city a few days ago. That's right, it's me. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyang from afar and replied coldly. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. He glanced at the person beside the old man in black, and his pupils suddenly contracted. It was a middle-aged man. He was 7 feet tall. He was wearing a fitting black robe. His eyes were deep. His facial features were sharp, and there were strands of white hair at his temples. His expression was rather chilly, and he gave off an indifferent feeling that kept others 1,000 miles away. And it was this person who gave Qin Feiyang a great sense of uneasiness. Tang Hai said, His aura feels a little familiar. Familiar? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Sensing the middle-aged man's aura, his eyes trembled slightly. It was really familiar. Where had he seen it before? Tang Hai suddenly said, I remember, it's the murderous intent hidden in the young man's soul. That's right. Qin Feiyang also suddenly realized. At that time, the murderous intent that emerged from the young man's soul was exactly the same as the aura of this person. It meant the owner of the murderous intent was this person. The middle-aged man looked at Qin Feiyang, and a smile gradually appeared on his cold face. He said, You are indeed an extraordinary young man. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was surprised. This person didn't seem to have any malicious intent. The middle-aged man said, Little brother, may I know your name? Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and said, My name is Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang. Qin Batian. The middle-aged man pondered for a while and said with a smile, So you are really the descendant of Qin Batian? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The middle-aged man looked excited. Qin Feiyang was surprised again. What was this man excited about? The middle-aged man flashed and teleported toward Qin Feiyang and the others. Tang Hai's face changed slightly, and he quickly stood in front of Qin Feiyang and shouted, Stop, don't come near us. The middle-aged man was stunned and stopped in the void hundreds of feet away. He looked at Tang Hai apologetically and said with a smile, I was impulsive, I hope brother can forgive me. Tang Hai said in a low voice, What do you want? This man's behavior was too abnormal. Logically speaking, when the young man and the black-clothed old man suffered losses in their hands, this man should be looking for trouble. But at this moment, this man was polite, as if he had met a benefactor. As the saying goes, there must be a demon when things are abnormal. Facing this man, he must not be careless. Looking at Tang Hai's vigilant look, the middle-aged man quickly said, Brother, don't be nervous, I have no ill intentions. Is that so? Tang Hai sneered. The middle-aged man nodded and said with a smile, Let me introduce myself first. My surname is Gua, and my name is Zixiong. This is Gua's second uncle, Guada. Gua Zixiong Guada, Qin Feiyang murmured. He had never heard of these two names before. But judging from the seniority of the two, this Gua Zixiong should be the young man's father. Gua Zixiong looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, The reason why I came to you is that I have to confirm your identity in person. Confirm my identity? Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes. You probably don't know, in fact, Qin Batian and I are very good friends. Gua Zixiong said. What? You are a friend of my ancestor? Qin Feiyang was stunned. So Brother Batian is your ancestor. This is really a case of the Dragon King's temple being washed away by the flood. Gua Zixiong laughed loudly. What's going on? Qin Feiyang asked. Gua Zixiong seemed to be lost in his memories, and was silent for a long time. After a long time he sighed. Your ancestor is not only my friend, but also my benefactor. Benefactor? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This was really unexpected. Yes. Back then, I was surrounded by enemies and was about to die. In the end, your ancestor appeared and saved me from danger. Ever since then, your ancestor and I would often gather together and drink to our heart's content. Over time, the two of us became close friends. And we also had an agreement. Gua Zixiong said. What agreement? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Gua Zixiong said, If one day the descendants of the Qin clan enter the ancient world, if my Gua clan is still around, and if I give birth to a son or a daughter, our two clans will be united by marriage. United by marriage? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Wasn't a marriage alliance a marriage? Tang Hai was also stunned. He looked at Gua Zixiong and asked, Do you have a daughter now? Gua Zixiong said with a smile, I have a daughter more than 5,000 years ago. What the hell? More than 5,000 years ago? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched fiercely. At this age, she could be his ancestor. Ancestor. Tang Hai was also extremely speechless. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang, cupped his hands and said with a smile, Congratulations, young master. Congratulations on having a fiancé. No, it's a fiancé. A row of black lines appeared on Qin Feiyang's forehead. He glared at Tang Hai and looked at Gua Zixiong saying, You have no proof. I can't believe you. Guo Zixiong said. Who said I have no proof? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Guo Zixiong took out a long brocade box from his cosmos bag and said, there is a marriage contract in here, written by your ancestor himself. It also has my and your ancestor's signatures. What the hell? There's even a marriage contract. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at Tang Hai and said, go and get it. I'll verify it. Yes. Tang Hai responded respectfully and walked to Guo Zixiong. Guo Zixiong did not hesitate and directly handed the brocade box to Tang Hai. Tang Hai held the brocade box and went back to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang opened the brocade box. There was indeed a piece of paper in it, folded neatly. Ancestor, you're not joking with me, are you? Qin Feiyang murmured, took out the paper, and slowly unfolded it. What entered his sight was the words marriage contract. Below, there were rows of small words. The content was similar to what Guo Zixiong had said before. It was roughly, today I have made a promise with brother Zixiong. If the descendants of the Qin clan enter the ancient world, regardless of whether they are men or women, as long as the Guo clan still exists, I will marry the Guo clan's descendants. This promise will be valid for life. My descendants will abide by it. This, Qin Feiyang was stunned. Tang Hai leaned over and looked at it carefully. Then he transmitted his voice. Young master, is this your ancestor's handwriting? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Although he had never seen his ancestor, there were still many paintings of his ancestor in the library of the imperial palace. He had seen all of these paintings before. Thus, he was able to tell with a single glance that these paintings were indeed written by his ancestor. He looked at the paper and the ink on it. The paper had been specially treated and could be preserved for 10,000 years. As for the ink on it, it did not look like it was just written. Was this marriage contract real? Although the handwriting was his ancestor's, he still did not want to believe it. This was too absurd. His ancestor was such a wise person. How could he leave such a marriage contract in the ancient world? Moreover, he could not even be sure if his ancestor had been to the ancient world. Guo Zixiong smiled and said, little brother, I know it's hard for you to accept now, but this is the truth. Qin Feiyang frowned, put the marriage contract back into the brocade box, and asked Tang Hai to return it to Guo Zixiong. Guo Zixiong also immediately put it away. To tell you the truth, although there is this marriage contract, I always thought that it would not be true, because ordinary people can't enter the ancient world at all. But what I never expected was that after 10,000 years, you actually barged in, and even let Ji Er's second uncle meet you by accident. Say, isn't this fate? Guo Zixiong smiled with relief. This fate came too suddenly. Qin Feiyang muttered. Tang Hai secretly asked, young master, what should we do? I must obey the ancestor's will, but, Qin Feiyang frowned. Chapter 1707. Wait. Qin Feiyang suddenly frowned. He seemed to have missed something. He thought carefully for a moment, and his eyes trembled slightly. He looked at Guo Zixiong and asked, you just said that this marriage contract has existed for 10,000 years. Yes. Guo Zixiong nodded. Qin Feiyang said, in other words, my ancestor appeared in the ancient world when the miracle opened last time? Guo Zixiong thought for a moment and said, according to the time, it seems to be after the miracle closed. After the miracle closed? Qin Feiyang looked at Tang Hai and said, I remember the fire python clearly said that when my ancestor entered the miracle for the second time, he was directly forced to the third floor by the fire dragon. How could he appear in the ancient world? How would I know? Tang Hai said secretly. What is going on? Qin Feiyang was full of doubts. Little brother, do you think this is okay? It will be difficult for you to accept this marriage contract now. Why don't you come back with me first? As for the marriage contract, we can discuss it later. Guo Zixiong suggested. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated for a moment, turned to look at Guo Da, and asked, do you know about the existence of this marriage contract? Yes. Why? Guo Da looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, why didn't you tell me when we met in the ancient city a few days ago? Guo Da suddenly understood and said with a hoarse smile, Although I saw the purple gold dragon blood at that time, I couldn't confirm your identity, so I didn't mention it. What he said was reasonable, and there was no flaw in it. Qin Feiyang was silent for a moment, then shook his head and said, "This is too sudden. I really don't know whether to believe you or not." "Understandable." Guo Zixiong nodded and smiled. Guo De took out a gray crystal from his arms and asked with a smile, "Little brother, have you been looking for this crystal these days?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and said in surprise, "You have it too?" "Of course. This crystal is called a soul stone. It's a great help in condensing divine sense. My Guo clan has a large amount of soul stones. If you return with us, I guarantee that you will get a lot." Guo De smiled. "How much is a lot?" Qin Feiyang's heart moved as he asked. Guo De said, "It's a number you can't imagine." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he said calmly, "If that's the case, why don't you give me some now?" Guo De hesitated. "Little brother, you might not know this, but this soul stone is quite rare in the ancient realm. However, since little brother wants it, there's no harm in me giving you some now. Take it as my sincerity." Guo Zixiong smiled, took out a qiankuan bag and threw it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang hastily grabbed the qiankuan bag and lowered his head to check it. Immediately, a look of shock crept onto his face. There were no less than 500 soul stones in this qiankuan bag. This was truly an unexpected gain. He raised his head and looked at Guo Zixiong and Yi Zichen. One had to be wary of others. But from beginning to end, he didn't find any trace of deceit in their expressions. "Zai, what's going on? Ancestor, can you give me a hint?" Qin Feiyang sighed secretly. "Little brother, there's no time to lose. Let's hurry back. I think my daughter would also like to meet you, her future husband." Guo Zixiong stepped aside and stretched out his hand with a smile. Tang Hai said calmly, "Young master, be careful of any tricks." Qin Feiyang was hesitant. Qin Feiyang, but at this moment, an anxious roar could be heard. Qin Feiyang was stunned. This seemed to be the voice of the golden leopard. Why did it come here? Qin Feiyang hurriedly looked up and saw a golden stream of light streaking across the sky like lightning and landing in front of Qin Feiyang. Who else could it be but the golden leopard? It was panting and its eyes were full of anxiety. Qin Feiyang suddenly had an uneasy premonition and asked, "What happened?" "Something big has happened. Old Zhao is in danger." The golden divine leopard gasped for breath. "What?" Qin Feiyang's body trembled. "Come with me quickly." After the golden leopard finished speaking, it turned around and began to return the way it came. Qin Feiyang's face darkened slightly. Looking at Guo Zixiong and Yi Zichen, he cupped his hands and said, "I'm sorry, I have something urgent to deal with. I'll visit again when I have time." After that, Qin Feiyang looked at Tang Hai and urged, "Hurry up and follow the leopard." Tang Hai waved his hand, rolled up Qin Feiyang, and immediately chased after the golden leopard. The undead also immediately turned around and chased after Qin Feiyang and the others. "You don't know how to appreciate favors." Looking at the backs of Qin Feiyang and the others, Guo De snorted coldly and turned to Guo Zixiong, asking, "Patriarch, what do we do now?" Guo Zixiong's eyes flashed and he said in a low voice, "Let's follow and take a look." Swish. Guo Zixiong waved his hand and the two disappeared without a trace. "Junior leopard, what happened?" Back to Qin Feiyang. After catching up with the golden leopard, he immediately asked, "That day, after leaving the Black Tortoise realm, I immediately rushed to meet up with old Zhao as you said. But on the second day after we met up, Mu Tianyang suddenly brought people out, and even revived that blood blade. Although old Zhao broke through to the war god realm, he was suppressed by that blood blade." The golden leopard said. Tang Hai said angrily, "What about you? Why didn't you help him?" "Who said I didn't help him? But that blood blade was too terrifying. In just one exchange, I was seriously injured." Old Zhao saw that the situation was not good, so he secretly told me to come find you. He tried his best to delay Mu Tianyang. The golden leopard said. "Then how did you find us?" Qin Feiyang asked. One had to know. Before the golden leopard left, he didn't say where he was going. The golden leopard said, It's all thanks to it that I was able to find you. Ooh. Qin Feiyang was suspicious. With a clang, the divine phoenix blade flew out of the golden leopard's body. Divine phoenix blade. Qin Feiyang was surprised. The divine phoenix blade absorbed your purple gold dragon blood and purple gold dragon qi, so it can sense your location. These days it has been guiding me. The golden leopard said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang nodded his head in realization, but his expression suddenly changed and said, I gave the divine phoenix blade to old Zhao for him to protect himself, but you took the divine phoenix blade away. Then wouldn't he have no chance of winning against Mu Tianyang? It wasn't me who wanted to take it away, it was old Zhao who asked me to, because he knew that even if he kept the divine phoenix blade, he wouldn't be able to defeat Mu Tianyang. It's even possible that it would be destroyed by the blood blade. The golden leopard said. It would be a pity if a divine artifact that has given birth to a spirit artifact was destroyed. At this time, a familiar voice was heard. Qin Feiyang was startled. He turned his head and saw Guizixiong beside him. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Your ancestor and I are as close as brothers. You are his descendant, which means you are my descendant. If you are in trouble, how can I just stand by and watch? Guizixiong laughed. Qin Feiyang was hesitant. Tang Hai sent a sound transmission. Young master, this Guizixiong's strength is unfathomable. Maybe he can really help us. Hearing that, Qin Feiyang looked at Guizixiong and laughed. Thank you, senior. Guizixiong said. Calling me senior is too polite. If you don't mind, just call me Uncle Gua. Qin Feiyang was startled and nodded. All right, but uncle can't always call me little brother in the future. It's really messing up the seniority. That makes sense. Then from now on, I'll call you nephew. Guizixiong laughed. Nephew? Qin Feiyang was speechless. This was still messing up the seniority. The title of nephew was usually used by two parents who had a good relationship with their juniors. For example, if Guizixiong had a good relationship with his father, then it was natural for Guizixiong to call him nephew. But one had to know. Now the people who had a good relationship with Guizixiong were not his father's generation, but his ancestors, who were several generations away. Logically speaking, in front of Guizixiong he should still call him ancestor. This relationship was really complicated. Guizixiong seemed to see Qin Feiyang's depression and laughed. We are us, it doesn't matter if it's your ancestors. You don't have to worry so much. Uncle is right. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Guizixiong said. Your speed is too slow, we'll take you there. Where is it? Qin Feiyang exhaled, threw away the distracting thoughts, put away the divine phoenix blade and said, the entrance of the ancient world. Entrance? Guizixiong and Guoda looked at each other, raised their eyebrows unnoticeably, and then Guizixiong led a group of people and disappeared into the sky like lightning. From the entrance to here, Qin Feiyang and Tang Hai took 7 or 8 days. But Guizixiong only took half a day to return to the entrance of the ancient world with a group of people. One could only imagine how strong Guizixiong's cultivation was. However, at this moment, there was only a lonely stone door at the entrance. There was not a single person in sight. The ground around the stone door was in ruins. Many bottomless abysses covered the land within a radius of tens of thousands of miles like a spider web. In the air, there were even faint fluctuations of battle. Guizixiong looked around and frowned. There was indeed an exciting battle here, but it has already ended. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang and sighed. I'm afraid that your subordinate is doomed. Damn it. Qin Feiyang clenched his hands and blamed himself. It's my fault, I shouldn't have let old Zhao stay here alone. Young master. But before he could finish, a joyful cry came from a chasm, not far away. Qin Feiyang hurriedly looked up, and saw a figure rushing out of the abyss. Who else could it be but Zhao Tailai? Qin Feiyang hurriedly ran over, grabbed Zhao Tailai's shoulder, and said in surprise, You didn't die? I almost died. If I hadn't run away quickly, you would have seen a corpse now. Zhao Tailai sighed with lingering fear, and then knelt down in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was taken aback and frowned. What are you doing? Zhao Tailai lowered his head and said, It's my incompetence that I couldn't stop Mu Tianyang. Young master, Please punish me. Why should I punish you? This is my fault. I know that Mu Tianyang has a blood blade, but I still let you guard here. This is simply sending you to your death. You should blame me. Get up quickly, as long as you're fine. Qin Feiyang bent over and helped Zhao Tailai up. Young master, Zhao Tailai murmured. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said with a smile. Okay, don't be like a woman and be shy. Zhao Tailai smiled in relief. Chapter 1708. Zhao Tailai said, They have already left the ancient realm. Left the ancient realm? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. That's not right. Aren't they also entangled by the devil's mark? How would they dare to leave? Tang Hai said. Wang Yuanshan and the people from the Nether Hall are indeed entangled by the devil's mark, but Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing are not. Zhao Tailai said in a low voice. That's right. It hasn't even been half a year since the python took them out of the Black Tortoise realm. Qin Feiyang nodded. Tang Hai looked at Zhao Tailai and asked, Do you mean that only Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing have left the ancient realm and the others are still here? No. Originally, Mu Tianyang had planned to leave the others here. However, upon taking into consideration that we were still in the ancient realm, they did not dare to stay. Thus, they also left the ancient realm with Mu Tianyang. Zhao Tailai said. Aren't they courting death? Tang Hai was shocked. It's no different from courting death. However, although they are entangled by the devil's mark, they can still stay outside for 3 months. I believe young master knows this as well. Zhao Tailai said. I know. Back then, I met the willow tree at the miracle site and he told me all this. Qin Feiyang said. The golden leopard snorted. Although they can stay for 3 months, once the 3 months are up, they will definitely die. The others are not important. What's important is Mu Tianyang. His divine soul is about to condense. Once it appears, he will have the strength of a god of war. If we don't hurry to find him, when he enters the 2nd level, my cousin and the rest will definitely be killed. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. Lu Jiajin, Old Qin, the mysterious lady and the master of the Dragon Phoenix house, Yi Shu, were all on the 2nd level. Therefore he couldn't sit back and do nothing. Although he wanted to continue to stay in the ancient realm and investigate the matter of his ancestors, he had to prioritize everything. At present, dealing with Mu Tianyang was the most important thing. Uncle, this is an emergency. I have to leave the ancient realm first. We'll meet again. Qin Feiyang turned to Guazixiong and cupped his hands. Then he waved his hand and led Zhao Tailai and the others toward the stone door without looking back. Seeing this, the undead immediately followed. By the time Guazixiong reacted, the group of humans and the undead had already entered the stone door. This, Guoda was stunned. He turned to Guazixiong and asked, What should we do? Guazixiong's eyes were also rather gloomy. Guoda looked at the stone door again. Qin Feiyang and the others had already disappeared. He said angrily, I really can't accept this. I actually let him leave just like that. There's nothing we can do about it. It's our fault for not being able to enter the divine ruins. However, don't worry. This Qin Feiyang will definitely come to the ancient world again. Guazixiong took a deep breath and said. How so? Guoda was taken aback and looked at him suspiciously. Although I haven't known him for long, I can see that Qin Batian is very important to him. Guazixiong sneered. You mean after he finishes his business outside, he will come in again to inquire about Qin Batian? Guoda asked. Yes. Guazixiong nodded and said. Let's go back first and then send someone to guard here. As soon as he appears, we will be able to know his whereabouts immediately. Guoda said. Then this old man will guard here personally. I don't trust anyone else. This? Guazixiong hesitated and nodded. All right, then I'll have to trouble second uncle. As long as we can complete our great cause, it's worth it. Guoda smiled. Definitely. Guazixiong clenched his hands, and his deep eyes flashed with a determined light. Divine ruins. In the sky above a barren mountain, Qin Feiyang and the others descended out of thin air. This place is completely different from the place where we first entered the ancient world. It seems that the ancient world has indeed been drifting aimlessly. Qin Feiyang scanned the mountains below and said. Zhao Tailai smiled and said, to be honest, the ancient world is really a very magical place. Qin Feiyang nodded. Suddenly, he noticed the undead at the side and asked in surprise, why did you follow us out? Tang Hai and Shen Bao's eyes were also full of shock. They actually didn't notice that this guy had followed them out. It is. Zhao Tailai was surprised. Previously at the entrance he had seen the undead, but at that time he didn't pay attention to it carefully. Qin Feiyang said, she is the undead we met in the ancient world. Undead. Zhao Tailai was shocked, and his divine might suddenly erupted. Don't be nervous. She doesn't seem to have any malicious intentions towards us. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Zhao Tailai was stunned and asked suspiciously, then why is she following us? I don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head and looked at the undead for a moment. Seeing that the undead didn't answer him, he gave up helplessly. Tang Hai glanced at the undead, looked at Qin Feiyang and suddenly said, young master, you just ran out like this. What about your fiancé? What? Fiancé? Zhao Tailai and the golden leopard looked at each other, and looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Qin Feiyang glared at Tang Hai, looked at Zhao Tailai and the golden leopard, and said with a smile, don't listen to his nonsense. Where did I get a fiancé? Tang Hai said indifferently, there is even a marriage contract and you still don't admit it. I say, can you keep your mouth shut? Qin Feiyang was quite annoyed. He didn't expect this cold guy to be so gossipy. Old Tang, what's going on? We have only been separated for a few days. How did the young master get a fiancé? And the two people who came with you before, who are they? Zhao Tailai ran to Tang Hai's side and asked in a low voice. Those two people are even scarier. That middle-aged man is called Guo Zixiong, the future father-in-law of the young master. His cultivation is at least at the Deshang stage. And that old man is called Guo Da, a war god at the small Cheng stage, and the future second grandfather of our young master. Tang Hai said. Deshang stage, small Cheng stage. Zhao Tailai and the divine leopard looked at each other. This was too scary. However, they still didn't understand. Why did Qin Feiyang suddenly have a fiancé? It's like this. Tang Hai glanced at Qin Feiyang and whispered to Zhao Tailai and the divine leopard. Boring. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at the two men and one beast, turned his head to look in the direction of the ancient world, and there was a trace of doubt between his brows. Why didn't Guo Zixiong and Guo Da come out? Could it be they couldn't leave the ancient world? Then he looked up at the sky again, and the doubt between his brows became even stronger. It had been so long. Why didn't he see the power of rule force appear? Moreover, at this moment, they were standing in the void. One had to know. On the first floor of this miracle, even space divine objects couldn't fly. Could it be that the fire python gave them special privileges? No. When they separated, the fire python didn't know about the existence of the golden divine leopard and Tang Hai, not to mention this undead. In other words, even if it gave special privileges, it would be given to him and Zhao Tailai, and would never give it to Tang Hai, the divine leopard, and the undead. Then there was only one reason. The fire python was nearby. Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze, scanned the surroundings and smiled. Brother Fire, long time no see, how have you been? And Tang Hai, Zhao Tailai, and the divine leopard, upon hearing Qin Feiyang's words, couldn't help but look stunned. Who was he talking to? Haha. Accompanied by a hearty laugh, the shadow of a huge beast shot out from a mountain stream below at lightning speed. When it appeared in front of Qin Feiyang, who else could it be but the fire python? Greetings, Lord Guardian. Zhao Tailai hurriedly bowed. Shen Bao and Tang Hai's expressions were also extremely respectful. No need to be so polite. The fire python smiled. Its attitude was very easygoing. Looking at Qin Feiyang, it shook its head and said helplessly, I originally wanted to give you a surprise, but before this emperor appeared, I was already discovered by you. It's really boring. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh. The fire python asked, how was the trip to the ancient realm? Qin Feiyang sighed. Just as Brother Fire said, the ancient realm is full of opportunities. The fire python nodded, its expression becoming serious, and said, "Actually, this emperor has been waiting for you here." "Waiting for me?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "That's right. 3 days ago, this emperor suddenly sensed that someone had activated the power of the rules on the first level, so I immediately rushed over to check. In the end, I found that it was a group of humans. According to this emperor's interrogation, they are Mu Tianyang's group that you are looking for." The fire python said. Qin Feiyang asked, "Then where are they now?" "They are on the second level. It was Lord Beast God who brought them to the second level. Lord Beast God also helped the people of the Heavenly Sun Empire, and the Nether Hall remove the demon mark," the fire python said. "What? Why did it do that? Isn't it breaking the rules?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. "Rules? Most of the rules of this miracle were set by Lord Beast God. Do you think these rules are useful to it?" The fire python sneered. Qin Feiyang fell silent. This emperor also asked Lord Beast God why it did this. Do you know what its answer was? The fire python's expression was full of helplessness. "What's its answer?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "It said that you have removed the demon mark. If those people are still bound by the demon mark, then this show is not worth watching," the fire python said. "Show?" Qin Feiyang suddenly burned with anger. Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai were also indignant. The fire python glanced at the three of them and sighed. "This emperor knows that you are very uncomfortable now, but in the eyes of Lord Beast God, this is just a game. It has such strength, so I dare not say anything. However, the removal of the demon imprint was obtained through my own efforts. Is it fair for it to do this?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. The fire python said, "Fairness is built on the foundation of great strength." Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply and said, "Brother Fire, how can I not know this? But in my heart, I feel a little uncomfortable." All right. Although Lord Beast God's method is unfair, isn't this emperor secretly helping you? Chapter 1709. Thank you, Brother Fire. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and thanked him, but suddenly raised his eyebrows and said, "Brother Fire, what did you say? Secretly help me?" "Yes. The Beast God has already learned of the relationship between this emperor and you, and strictly forbade this emperor from being involved with you." Fire Dragon sighed. "This bastard small beast." Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and asked, "Where is the fire dragon now?" "This emperor doesn't know. Since the Beast God let it enter the third floor, it has never appeared again. Regarding this, Lord Beast God was also vague about it," Fire Python said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "It can't be shielding the fire dragon, right?" This emperor also thought so, but thinking back, even if the Beast God is shielding it, what can this emperor do? Fire Python sighed, his expression full of helplessness. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly, looking at Fire Python, and said word by word, "Don't worry, small beast won't kill it, I will help you kill it." This. Fire Python looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze. "Although I am not small beast's opponent now, I am confident that I will be able to trample it under my feet in the future," Qin Feiyang said. Fire Python's expression suddenly changed and he whispered, "Don't say this again in the future. If the Beast God finds out, even this emperor can't protect you." Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "I know what to do, don't worry." "As long as you know what to do." Fire Python nodded and asked with a smile, "Do you have any plans now?" Qin Feiyang said, "Of course, to the second floor." "To deal with Mu Tianyang?" Fire Python asked. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Fire Python looked at him deeply and said, "Well, this emperor will take you in now." "Wait," Qin Feiyang hurriedly said. "What?" The Fire Python was suspicious. Qin Feiyang asked, "There are humans in the ancient realm, do you know?" "There are humans?" The Fire Python was slightly taken aback. It shook its head and said, "This emperor really doesn't know. Are they strong?" "Very strong. I met 2 people. One is a war god of small completion stage, the other is a war god of Dashang stage," Qin Feiyang said solemnly. "What?" The Fire Python was shocked. A war god at the Deshang stage is rare even on the second level of the miracle. Only the beast emperors of the various territories have such strength. Qin Feiyang said. Then do you know if there are any other entrances to the ancient realm? Other entrances? The fire python was stunned. Qin Feiyang said, for example, is there a passage to the ancient realm on the third level? The third floor. The fire python pondered for a while and shook its head. You also know that this emperor has just become a guardian not long ago, and is not very clear about many places in the miracle. However, if what you said is true, then this emperor needs to make a trip to the ancient realm. You want to go to the ancient realm? Qin Feiyang said. The fire python smiled. Such a magical place. If there is a chance, I will definitely go and take a look. Qin Feiyang said. Then if you find anything, remember to tell me. What do you want to know? The fire python was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said. To tell you the truth, there are people in the ancient realm who know about the existence of my ancestor. How is this possible? Didn't your ancestor enter the third level? The fire python said. That's why I asked you if there is an entrance to the ancient realm on the third level. If there is, then everything makes sense. But if there isn't, then I really don't understand. How did my ancestor enter the ancient realm? Qin Feiyang said. I see. The fire python suddenly understood. Qin Feiyang pointed to the undead and said, also help me send her back to the ancient realm. Hearing this, the undead immediately shook her head at Qin Feiyang, as if saying don't send her back. The fire python looked at the undead. Qin Feiyang said, she is the undead of the ancient realm. I don't know why she came out with me. The undead of the ancient realm. The fire python murmured. Seeing the undead shaking her head desperately, it smiled and said, since she followed you, there must be a reason. Why don't you keep her by your side? Maybe at a critical moment, she can help you. Hearing this, the undead immediately nodded to Qin Feiyang, as if to say, I can help you. Qin Feiyang frowned and looked at the undead hesitating. Suddenly, the undead ran to Qin Feiyang and grabbed Qin Feiyang's arm, as if she was acting coquettishly. The fire python teased, Brother Qin, it seems that your charm is not bad. Even the undead likes you. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and looked at the undead. Okay, you can follow me for the time being, but I have to say the ugly words first. Don't hurt anyone around me, or don't blame me for being ruthless. The undead nodded repeatedly. This undead is very interesting. And looking at her form, she must have been a woman when she was alive. Brother Qin's luck with women is not bad. The fire python laughed. Brother Fire, why do you like to joke so much? Qin Feiyang was speechless. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Is there anything else to do? If not, this emperor will send you to the second floor. The fire python said. Boss, let the fire python find Feng Lingair and Zhao Shuang. Fatso's voice suddenly sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Yeah, I actually forgot about them. Wait, there seems to be another acquaintance. Yes, it's Tan Wu. Qin Feiyang hurriedly looked at the fire python and said, help me check if these three people are still on the first floor. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the shadows of Tan Wu and the other two condensed. Okay. The fire python closed its eyes, and its perception was infinitely magnified. Everything in the entire miracle was revealed in its eyes. A moment later, it opened its eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, the man was found, and there was a hell god hound by his side, but the two women, this emperor did not find them. You didn't find them? Qin Feiyang's heart suddenly sank. Could it be that something had happened to Zhao Shuang, and Feng Lingair? Inside the castle, Fatty's face was filled with bewilderment. Lu Hong said, Fatso, quickly ask Feiyang, did he show the fire python their previous appearances or their current appearances? Before? Now. Fatso was puzzled. Don't forget, their current identities are Zhao Yu and Feng Ranran. In the miracle, they will definitely maintain their current appearances like Ling Yunfei and Luo Qingzhu. Lu Hong said, yes, they must have changed their appearances now. Fatso suddenly realized and immediately transmitted his voice to Qin Feiyang. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he also suddenly realized. He condensed the changed appearances of Zhao Shuang, and Luo Qingzhu, and said to the fire python, "Then look again, can you find them?" The fire python closed its eyes again. Soon, it opened its eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. "There are them, they are together, and now they seem to be cultivating in a water source." Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief and asked, "What about the man?" "His situation is not very good," the fire python said. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang's heart tightened. "See for yourself." After the fire python finished speaking, the void in front of it distorted, and a picture quickly emerged. "Little scum, it's all your fault. I said from the beginning that we should go around and not provoke them, but you insisted on barging in. Let me tell you, if anything happens to this emperor will definitely not let you off." Immediately, as soon as the picture appeared, a voice like a shrew's cursing in the street echoed in the void. Qin Feiyang's face twitched. This voice was too familiar. As soon as he heard it, he knew that it was the cursing voice of the hellhound. And the little scum in the mouth of the hellhound was Tan Wu. It really hasn't changed at all. Even the rhythm of cursing is the same as before. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly and raised his head to look at the picture. He saw the hellhound and Tan Wu fighting a bloody battle on a plain. Surrounding them was a group of black centipedes. Densely packed. Limitless. But that was not an ordinary centipede. It was a type of extremely poisonous, huge, and extremely ferocious blood-colored centipede. Some of them were even more than 10 meters long. Below their abdomens, 2 rows of tentacles were like steel blades, glowing with astonishing sharpness. The strongest one's cultivation had even reached the peak realm. From afar, Tan Wu and the hellhound's surroundings were like waves of blood-colored waves surging. The number was too large, and it was impossible to count. As for Tan Wu and the hellhound, their cultivation was not low either. They had both reached 8-star War Emperor. But at this moment, they were in an extremely sorry state. Not only were their bodies riddled with wounds, their lips and faces were also black. Obviously, they had all been poisoned. "Oh my God, I've already killed for a day and a night. When will it end? Tan Wu, you bastard. If you want to kill me, I won't let you have an easy time." The hellhound cursed angrily. "Can you shut up? If I wanted to kill you, why would I follow you in?" Tan Wu said angrily. The hellhound roared. "Are you crazy? Otherwise, why would you run in?" Zhao Tailai looked at the man and beast and asked suspiciously, "Young master, what's the situation between them?" "They are enemies." Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly. Zhao Tailai said, "You mean this hellhound is his spiritual pet?" "Not a spiritual pet, a partner," Qin Feiyang said. "Then what are they arguing about? I thought they were opponents." Zhao Tailai was speechless. "Just get used to it," Qin Feiyang said. Anyway, every time they met Tan Wu and the hellhound, they were basically bickering endlessly. This way of getting along is really strange. Zhao Tailai shook his head. Qin Feiyang looked at the fire python and said with a smile, "Brother Fire, let's go over and take a look." "Okay." The fire python nodded. An invisible force emerged, and a group of people immediately descended in the sky above the plain. On the plain, corpses were everywhere. Fresh blood dyed the ground red. A pungent smell of blood assailed their nostrils. Qin Feiyang and the group scanned the plain. Even with their current strength and cultivation, they couldn't help but admire Tan Wu and the hellhound. The ground was full of blood centipede corpses. These corpses were all combat emperors. There were even many who had reached 9-star combat emperor. As for Tan Wu and the hellhound, relying on the cultivation of 8-star combat emperor, not only did they fight here for a day and a night, but they also killed so many blood centipedes. Their methods were really amazing. Chapter 17:10. I'll go and help them. The golden divine leopard chuckled. "Don't." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. "What's wrong? Aren't they your friends?" The golden divine leopard was stunned. "It's because they're my friends that I know them well. This little difficulty won't be a problem for them. Especially this Tan Wu. In some aspects he's stronger than me." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Is that so?" The golden divine leopard expressed its doubts. Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound were fully focused on fighting the bloody centipedes, and didn't notice Qin Feiyang and the others in the sky. The Hell Divine Hound took a detoxification pill and crushed a bloody centipede with one foot, saying, "Little scum, if this goes on, we'll all be finished." Tan Wu also smashed a bloody centipede with a punch, and then took a detoxification pill. He nodded and said, "You're right. If this goes on, you and I will be finished." A man and a beast looked at each other. The next moment, they each took out a pill and threw it into their mouths. What? Qin Feiyang's gaze suddenly trembled. Zhao Tailai, Tang Hai, the golden divine leopard, and the fire python were also in disbelief. Although Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound only took a moment from taking out the pills to taking them, they could clearly see that the two pills were surrounded by dragon-shaped pill qi. Dragon-shaped pill qi. In this world, only divine pills could give birth to dragon-shaped pill qi. In other words, Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound had taken two divine pills. "Young master, am I seeing things?" Zhao Tailai said. "No." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "No. But how is this possible? Even Tang Hai and I have never seen divine pills. How could the two of them have them?" Zhao Tailai said in disbelief. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, "I think it should be that old man who gave it to them." "That old man?" Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai were stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously, asking, "Which old man?" The fire python was also very curious. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "You wouldn't know even if I told you." Boom. Before he finished speaking, Tan Wu and the Hell God Hound's aura suddenly soared. This, Zhao Tailai and the others were shocked. Qin Feiyang said, "What they consumed before was the 5 Elements Universe pill." "So it's this kind of pill?" Zhao Tailai suddenly understood. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He turned to look at Zhao Tailai and asked in surprise, "You know about it too?" "Yes. We know about this elixir because of the Heavenly Sun Empire." Zhao Tailai said. "Heavenly Sun Empire?" Qin Feiyang murmured. "That's right. I remember that during the last divine miracle, someone from the Tianyang Empire entered the Black Tortoise world and presented a manual called the Pill Mantra to the Emperor of the Tianyang Empire. There are many unheard of pill recipes recorded in this manual. However, our Vanga League and Fengtian Palace also received the news immediately. Because at that time, both of our forces had spies lurking around the Emperor. When we learned about this, we were also very shocked and wanted to take the pill mantra for ourselves. A bloody storm is about to begin. However, in the end, it was a situation where both sides suffered. The pill mantra was also destroyed in our battle. Zhao Tailai said. Qin Feiyang asked, "Do the people of the Tianyang Empire know about these pill recipes?" "They don't know either. Because our Vanga League and Fengtian Palace will not allow the Tianyang Empire to control these pill recipes. After all, these pills are too heaven-defying. If we let the Tianyang Empire continue to develop like this, it will inevitably threaten us. So our two super forces joined forces to eliminate all the people of the Tianyang Empire who entered the Black Tortoise world. Moreover, we used the puppet technique to read the memories of the Emperor and the Divine Overlords. After confirming that they didn't know about the pill recipes, we let them go," Zhao Tailai said. "If even you don't know about the existence of the pill mantra, then how did Mu Tianyang obtain this pill mantra? When did he obtain it?" Qin Feiyang frowned. The pill mantra had always been a mystery. He wanted to find out, but he didn't know where to start. Zhao Tailai said in surprise, "You're saying that the pill mantra belongs to Mu Tianyang?" "Yes. But the original is now in my hands," Qin Feiyang said. "It's in your hands." Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. As the Nether Hall's Hall Master, Tang Hai also knew about this. Both of them didn't expect that the original pill mantra that all forces fought over was in Qin Feiyang's hands. The fire python suddenly said, "Brother Qin, can you let me take a look at the pill mantra?" "Sure." Qin Feiyang nodded and entered the ancient castle to take out the pill mantra. The fire python looked at it for a while and said with a smile, "Brother Qin, you're so lucky. This was written by the creator himself." "The creator wrote it?" Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai's eyes trembled. "Yes. Look, this is the name of the creator." The fire python erected the pill mantra. The two of them raised their heads and looked. On the cover of the pill mantra, there was indeed the word skyless. Qin Feiyang asked, "Then does Brother Hu know why this pill mantra fell into Mu Tianyang's hands?" The fire python shook its head and said, "I don't know. I've never seen this thing before. Maybe my father knows, but speaking of which..." A trace of grief immediately crept up on the fire python's face. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, I reminded you of something sad." "It's okay." The fire python smiled and returned the pill mantra to Qin Feiyang, exhorting, "You must treasure this thing well. After all, it belongs to the Creator. Maybe in the future, it will be of great help to you." "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded and returned to the castle with the pill mantra, placing it in the iron box of the 6-word divine arts. Hiding here was safer than anywhere else, because even Chang Shui couldn't break this iron box. When he appeared outside again, Tan Wu and the Hell God Hound's cultivation had already broken through to the 9-star War Emperor. The man and the beast were in high spirits. The Hell God Hound shouted, "Little slag, let's compete and see who kills more." "Don't always call me little slag, little slag. How am I worse than you? In the past, your cultivation was so much higher than mine. Now that I've caught up to you, you're the little slag." Tan Wu snorted coldly. If it weren't for old Master Qin helping you, would you be able to catch up to this emperor?" "I said you're a little slag, but you still don't admit it." The Hell God Hound's 6 heads and 12 eyes were filled with disdain. "Cut the crap. If you want to compete, then compete. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Tan Wu was furious. Boom. An ancient peak the size of a palm appeared. Its entire body was black and emitted a strong black light. Following closely, an obscure power surged out in all directions like an avalanche. The surrounding blood-colored centipedes immediately slowed down. "What is this?" the golden divine leopard said in shock. "His innate ability. This innate ability is called the gravity domain. Anyone who enters the domain will have their speed suppressed. Back then, under this gravity domain, I also suffered a lot," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The past surfaced in his mind like a tide. He also didn't expect that the former enemy would actually become friends. As soon as the gravity domain began, Tan Wu was like a god descending, killing in all directions. Even the blood centipedes at the peak of the 9-star War Emperor realm had no power to resist in front of him. Qin Feiyang watched for a while, then turned to look at the fire python and said with a smile, "The outcome has been decided. Let's go." "Go." "Not bringing them along." The fire python was stunned. "I understand Tan Wu. He is a person with ambition and pride. Even if I want to take him away, he won't follow me. Let's go take a look at those 2 women," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The fire python nodded and brought Qin Feiyang and the group of people to the sky above an oasis without making a sound. Below, the mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the scenery was pleasant. In front of a lake, 2 women sat cross-legged, their long hair dancing in the wind. Although their appearances were very ordinary, their temperaments were extremely outstanding. Of course, this was just a fake face. Their true appearances were all heavenly beauties, because they were Fengling Er and Zhao Shuang Er. The golden divine leopard muttered, "Their cultivation has already reached the peak of the 9-star War Emperor realm. Is there still a need to cultivate? They are already comprehending the profound meaning of becoming a god," Qin Feiyang said. Zhao Tailai frowned and said, "Comprehending here seems to be a little dangerous." The fire python suddenly said, "Wait, there's another person here." "There's another person?" Qin Feiyang and the others were surprised and asked, "Where?" The fire python brought Qin Feiyang and the others and quietly appeared above a mountain peak, saying, "He's down there." Qin Feiyang lowered his head and scanned the mountain peak. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto a big tree by the cliff. Beside the big tree stood a young man in black. How is this possible? Why is he at the miracle site? When he saw the face of the young man in black, Qin Feiyang's face was immediately filled with surprise and doubt. The young man in black was about 1.9 meters tall and his body was quite strong. The black robe on his body was very fitting, and his thick black hair was casually draped over his shoulders, filled with a wild aura. The lake where Zhao Shuang, and the young man in black were not far from the giant peak where the young man in black was. At this moment, the young man in black lowered his head without saying a word. Looking at Zhao Shuang, and the young man in black, his dark eyes flickered with wisps of light. Look at his eyes, they are a little unfriendly. Young master, do you know him? Zhao Tailai transmitted his voice. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded, his brows tightly knitted together. Who is it? Zhao Tailai asked. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and said, he can be considered an opponent and also a friend. An opponent and also a friend? Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai looked at each other. Why did it sound so contradictory? Why is he at the miracle site? I remember that when I entered the miracle site, I didn't see him. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself with a puzzled expression. Chapter 17:11. Then who exactly is he? Seeing Qin Feiyang's incredulous face, Zhao Tailai and the others were even more surprised. His surname is Dong Zhengyang. Qin Feiyang said. That's right. The black-clothed youth was Dong Zhengyang. He was naturally very familiar with Dong Zhengyang. How long had it been? He had actually broken through to the peak of the 9-star combat emperor realm. It was also unbelievable. What had Dong Zhengyang experienced in these few years? Whoosh! Suddenly, Dong Zhengyang rushed down the mountain. His aura was restrained to the extreme, like a ghost walking in the night. What does he want to do? Zhao Tailai was suspicious. But then, his face changed and he transmitted his voice. Young master, he seems to be going for the two women. Qin Feiyang looked at Dong Zhengyang, then looked at Zhao Shuang, and the other person by the lake, and could not help but frown. What did Dong Zhengyang want to do? Whoosh! Tang Hai suddenly rushed toward Dong Zhengyang without saying a word, and his eyes flashed with a shocking cold light. Qin Feiyang was stunned, and hurriedly transmitted his voice, don't hurt him. Got it. Tang Hai did not even turn his head as he responded. Let's go and take a look. Qin Feiyang said to Zhao Tailai, and rushed toward the lake. Zhao Tailai, Fire Python, and the Golden Divine Leopard looked at each other, and quickly followed. Very quickly, Dong Zhengyang lurked near Zhao Shuang, and the other person, hiding behind a bush, watching the two of them. As for Dong Zhengyang, who was hiding in the dark, Zhao Shuang and the other person were completely unaware. These two women are really careless, daring to cultivate in seclusion in such a place. Qin Feiyang was quite annoyed. The water source was a miracle. It could be said to be heaven, but it was also hell. Because in such a place, there were all kinds of hidden dangers. Crash. All of a sudden, Dong Zhengyang activated his fighting soul. A pitch-black iron chain appeared. It was as thick as an arm, and it was like a viper as it rushed towards Zhao Shuanger and her companion. Not good. Qin Feiyang's heart sank. What is it? Zhao Tailai looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice, his fighting soul can freeze people in the void. Fixed in the void? Zhao Tailai was stunned. That's right. As long as they are bound by the iron chains, Zhao Shuanger and her brother will not be able to move. They will be like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Qin Feiyang said. So scary? Zhao Tailai was surprised and asked, are we going to save them? Wait a moment. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. I've been waiting for you. Before he finished speaking, Zhao Shuanger and the other man suddenly opened their eyes. Their gazes swept directly toward Dong Zhengyang, their eyes flashing with intense cold light. Are they deliberately waiting for Dong Zhengyang? What's the situation? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Clang. Accompanied by an ear-piercing metal sound. A pocket-sized sword swept out from behind Zhao Shuanger. It was crystal clear, like a crystal, exuding a hazy luster. This seems to be her fighting soul, the heart of the divine sword. Qin Feiyang muttered. Innate magical ability, sword domain. Zhao Shuanger shouted again. The pocket-sized sword suddenly trembled, blooming with a brilliant light. Following closely, strands of sword chi emerged and shot out in all directions. In just a moment, a sword chi boundary of thousands of feet appeared out of nowhere. You guys are really difficult to deal with. Dong Zhengyang frowned. You know that we are difficult to deal with, but you still linger around? Zhao Shuang'er snorted coldly. Inside the boundary, countless battle swords appeared. Each battle sword was 3 feet long, 3 fingers wide, and seemed to be cast from cold iron, exuding a world-destroying sharpness. In the blink of an eye, Dong Xingyang's fighting soul rushed into the boundary. Clang! Seeing this, Zhao Shuang'er waved her jade-like hand. The battle swords in the boundary suddenly swarmed forward. Accompanied by a loud clang, the iron chain was cut into pieces in a short while. It felt that those battle swords were like a meat grinder. Anything that entered the boundary would be smashed into pieces. With his fighting soul destroyed, Dong Xingyang's body trembled slightly. A trace of blood immediately overflowed from the corner of his mouth, and his face was a little pale. Did you see that? You are not our opponent at all, Zhao Shuang'er said proudly. Feng Ling'er stood aside, and did not make a move from beginning to end. Looking at Dong Xingyang on the opposite side, there was a hint of ridicule on her face. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Shuang'er and murmured, "This little girl. She used to be a little playful. How did she become so tough now?" Zhao Shuang'er was the first person he met in Iron Ox Town besides Lin Yi. Therefore, he was very clear about Zhao Shuang'er's character. Not to say that she was gentle and lovely, but she could also be said to be a beautiful woman. But now he could only see a barbaric force in her. This is not right. I am not your opponent, Dong Xingyang murmured, looking at Zhao Shuang'er and Feng Ling'er. His eyes gradually became dead silent. Boom. All of a sudden, a terrifying aura rushed out of his body. What? As soon as this aura appeared, not only Qin Feiyang, but even Zhao Tailai and the others also changed their expressions. Because this was the aura of a beast. It seemed that in Dong Xingyang's body, there was a terrifying beast sleeping. At this moment, Dong Xingyang was awakening it. The aura was getting stronger and stronger. Zhao Shuang'er and Feng Ling'er looked at Dong Xingyang, and their expressions gradually became dignified. Roar. After about a few breaths, Dong Xingyang raised his head and let out a roar. It was really like a beast roaring. At this moment, his whole body was also filled with an amazing murderous aura. Following closely, an even more amazing scene appeared. They saw that Dong Xingyang's body was crazily growing bigger. The clothes on his body were torn to pieces. His muscles were bulging high. In less than 3 breaths, he became a giant of more than 10 meters tall. The terrifying aura, with him as the center, rolled in all directions. The entire water source was raised to the ground in an instant. What the hell is this? Zhao Shuang'er and Feng Ling'er looked at each other, and their faces were a little pale. Not your opponent. I don't know where you guys got the courage to say such disdainful words to me. Dong Xingyang roared, his black hair fluttering. His fist, which was as big as a millstone, smashed toward Zhao Shuang'er and Feng Ling'er. Sacred Sword Judgment. Zhao Shuang'er snorted coldly, and her battle aura surged. A battle sword appeared and slashed on Dong Xingyang's fist. Crack. However, in an instant the battle sword shattered. Zhao Shuang'er's delicate body trembled, and blood gushed from the corner of her mouth. So strong? Qin Feiyang was shocked. One had to know. The sacred sword judgment that Zhao Shuang'er evolved was also a perfect battle art, but it was actually shattered by Dong Xingyang's punch? Black demon body, invincible demon body, destroy it for me. Dong Xingyang roared again, and a fist smashed toward the two. The terrifying power even distorted the void. Don't be arrogant. One sword to break the soul. Zhao Shuang'er was not convinced, and a light flashed across the sky, tearing the earth. Dong Xingyang's eyes were full of disdain, and he directly punched out. The light instantly collapsed, without any resistance. How is this possible? Zhao Shuang'er was dumbfounded. His black demon body is a divine art, Feng Ling'er suddenly said. Divine art? Zhao Shuang'er's eyes trembled. Let me experience how terrifying your black demon body is. Feng Ling'er stepped out, and her body suddenly emitted lightning. That's right. That was the lightning, golden in color. The wisps of golden lightning flashed on her body, exuding a destructive aura. Even her eyes had turned golden, and at this moment, they were also bursting with lightning. Then, her 5 fingers suddenly clenched, raised her arm, and punched Dong Xingyang's fist. Her body did not change. So her fist was the same size as an ordinary person. Under Dong Xingyang's millstone-sized fist, her fist was as small as an ant. However, when the two fists, one big and one small, met, the two were actually forced back a few steps at the same time, showing a situation of being evenly matched. This meant that the strength of Feng Ling Er's fist was not inferior to Dong Xingyang's at all. Sister, amazing. Zhao Shuang'er ran to Feng Ling Er's side and giggled. Feng Ling Er smiled proudly and said, "Of course, I can't let you steal all the limelight alone. Luodan, Feng Ranran, when I was in the temple, why didn't I realize that you were so outstanding?" Dong Xingyang opened his mouth. His voice was like a bell, deafening. "That's because we keep a low profile." Zhao Shuang'er raised her head, like a proud little princess. Zhao Tailai was stunned, looked at Qin Feiyang and transmitted his voice. "Young master, they knew each other before?" "Yes. We all entered the temple together. However, Dong Xingyang probably doesn't know their true identities yet," Qin Feiyang said. "Keep a low profile?" Dong Xingyang raised his head and laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Zhao Shuang'er was dissatisfied. Dong Xingyang stopped laughing, looked down at the two of them and said, "Your strength is indeed very strong, but what?" Feng Ling Er raised her eyebrows. "Body of the heavenly devil." Dong Xingyang did not answer. With a roar, a bloody aura gushed out of his body like a tide. His long hair and eyes were instantly blood red. His aura was even more shocking. Boom. Without saying a word, he threw a punch at the two of them again. Feng Ling Er did not shrink back. She took a step forward, and golden lightning shattered the earth. Boom. Two fists, one big and one small, collided once again. Puff. Feng Ling Er immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Like a meteorite, she smashed into the ground behind her. Her whole body suddenly seemed to fall apart, and her face was pale. Zhao Shuang'er was dumbfounded. This strength was too frightening, wasn't it? If you only have this strength, then this is the end. Dong Xingyang laughed. His blood-red hair danced behind him, as if a peerless heavenly devil had descended, and his murderous aura was monstrous. This guy is getting more and more terrifying. I'm really looking forward to the battle with him. Qin Feiyang muttered. Zhao Tailai was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Which battle?" "Because of certain reasons, there will be a battle between him and me sooner or later." Qin Feiyang smiled. "I see." Zhao Tailai suddenly understood and said to himself, "Although his strength is indeed not bad compared to you, there is still a big gap. There is no suspense about his crushing defeat. Time will slowly change everything. How strong will he be in the future? No one can imagine. So it is too early to make a conclusion now. It's time to stop them. Otherwise, someone will definitely die." Chapter 17:12. Looking at Qin Feiyang, who suddenly appeared, the three of them were slightly stunned. Qin Feiyang looked up at Dong Xingyang and said with a smile, "Old friend, long time no see." "It's really you?" Dong Xingyang looked at Qin Feiyang, whose body was constantly shrinking, and his bloody eyes and bloody hair gradually returned to normal. "Yes, it's me." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Why are you here?" Dong Xingyang took out a shirt, put it on, and asked suspiciously. "I just happened to pass by. I didn't expect to meet you," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Dong Xingyang was stunned and shook his head. "I don't think there would be such a coincidence." "All right. I admit I've been here for a long time, but I didn't show up," Qin Feiyang said. Dong Xingyang nodded, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He looked at Qin Feiyang for a moment and said in surprise, "Your cultivation?" "That's right. I've already broken through to the pseudo-god realm." Qin Feiyang nodded. So fast, Dong Xingyang was stunned. This guy has already broken through to the pseudo-god realm? Zhao Shuang'er and Feng Ling Er were also shocked. Feng Ling Er said, "Be careful, don't reveal any flaws and let him find out our identities." "I know." Zhao Shuang'er nodded without a trace. After Dong Xingyang came back to his senses, he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Let me test your strength." Boom. As soon as he finished, he took a step forward, his battle chi rolling out, and punched towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled, raised his arm, stretched out his index finger, and gently pressed the tip of his finger on Dong Xingyang's fist. At that moment, Dong Xingyang's arm stopped in midair. No matter how much force he exerted, he could not advance even half an inch. He felt that Qin Feiyang's fingertips were like an insurmountable mountain in front of his fist. Dong Xingyang decisively retracted his arm and said with a smile, "The strength of a fake god is indeed terrifying. Your current strength is also not bad. However, there's something I can't figure out. How did you enter the divine sight? I didn't see you at that time." Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Dong Xingyang sighed. "It's a long story. I entered the divine sight by following the imperial preceptor." "Mingling with the imperial tutor?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "Yes. I killed a law enforcer from the law enforcement hall and disguised myself as that law enforcer to sneak in." Dong Xingyang said. "I see." Qin Feiyang came to a sudden realization and said with a smile, "It's rare for us to meet. Shall we get together?" When Dong Xingyang heard this, he fell silent. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "There's still time in the future. Let's meet again in the future. For now you step aside. I'm going to deal with the two of them." Dong Xingyang pointed at Fengling Air and Dong Xingyang, murderous intent surging in his eyes. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the two of them. He looked at Dong Xingyang and asked in confusion, "Back in the 9 underworlds, they fought side by side with us. They could be considered as old friends. Why did you kill them?" Dong Xingyang did not answer, and the murderous intent in his eyes was even stronger than before. "Brother Dong, what's going on?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Dong Xingyang's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he turned around and left without saying a word. Qin Feiyang was stunned. What was going on? "Qin Feiyang, there are many things that I can't tell you now. But there's one thing you have to remember. When you face me in the future, you must be careful," Dong Xingyang said without looking back. Then he sped up and disappeared from Qin Feiyang's sight like lightning. "Be careful. What does that mean?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Dong Xingyang's behavior today seemed a little abnormal. At this moment, Zhao Shuang'er and Feng Linger looked at each other, then turned around and sneaked away. "Stop." Qin Feiyang turned around and looked at the two of them. The two of them froze. "Where are you going?" Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them playfully. The two of them turned around and looked at Qin Feiyang. Feng Linger smiled and said, "To even be able to meet here, we're really fated." "Still pretending?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and said jokingly, "Yes, it's a coincidence. Why don't we go together?" No. The two of them quickly waved their hands. "You don't want to see me? Have I done anything wrong to you before?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. No. We just have some private matters to deal with. It's not convenient for us to go with you." The two of them laughed. "I see." Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "Then answer me first. How did you provoke Dong Xingyang?" "We didn't provoke him," Zhao Shuang'er said. "You didn't provoke him?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and said suspiciously, "Then why did he want to kill you?" "We don't know. It seems that half a year ago, we met him by accident. We wanted to say that we were old acquaintances, and we should go together. But this guy, I don't know what's wrong with him. He actually attacked us. Later, he even chased after us." The two of them said, "You didn't tell the truth. I know Dong Xingyang. He would never attack you for no reason. There must be a reason." Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "Why don't you believe me? I swear to God in the name of my grandfather. If there is half a lie, let God punish me and I will never be reincarnated," Feng Linger said. Qin Feiyang suddenly frowned. This woman dared to swear in the name of her grandfather? Feng Linger's grandfather was Feng Cheng. He took good care of Qin Feiyang in the early years. When Feng Cheng died, Qin Feiyang was sad for a long time. And before Feng Cheng died, he told him to take good care of Feng Linger. And Feng Cheng was Feng Linger's most respected and loved person. Feng Linger swore in the name of Feng Cheng, so what she said was absolutely true. However, what was the reason? He also knew Dong Xingyang. He was a very upright and admirable opponent. But this time, why did he want to kill Feng Ling, and Yi Zichen for no reason? Just as Qin Feiyang was pondering, Feng Ling wanted to sneak away again. But suddenly, Tang Hai was like a ghost, blocking in front of them. Who is it? The two of them suddenly changed their faces. This was because they could feel an unprecedented sense of danger from Tang Hai. At that moment, they turned and fled in the other direction, but Zhao Tailai appeared in front of them again. The two of them looked at each other and immediately turned and fled in the other direction. Do you think I don't exist? Accompanied by a cackle, the golden divine leopard stood up from a patch of grass. The two of them turned pale. Even though Tang Hai, Zhao Tailai, and the golden leopard were concealing their auras, they were still divine gods of battle and false god realm. Their gazes alone were enough to make Feng Ling, and Qin Nan feel despair. Zhao Tailai rolled his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang saying, "Young master, Menger's death has always been a pain in this subordinate's heart. Why don't you bestow them to this subordinate, and let them give birth to a son or daughter for this subordinate?" "Old bastard, you're shameless." When Zhao Shuang heard this, her beautiful face suddenly turned pale. Qin Feiyang was also slightly stunned. When he saw Zhao Tailai's slightly playful eyes, he smiled and nodded. "Yes, but what?" Zhao Tailai was suspicious. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Shuang, and Zhao Tailai, frowning and said, "The two of them are so ugly. What if they give birth to an ugly monster?" "Yes, I really didn't think of this," Zhao Tailai said. "Qin Feiyang, you bastard. We fought side by side. How can you treat us like this? Are you still human? Besides, how are we ugly?" Zhao Shuang, and Zhao Tailai gnashed their teeth and cursed. Qin Feiyang said, "Usually ugly people won't admit it." The two of them were so angry that they trembled. Zhao Tailai said, "Although a little ugly, it's okay. I don't mind." "We don't mind you, okay?" the two of them hurriedly said. "You don't mind me?" Zhao Tailai pointed at his nose with a face of disbelief. Cough cough. "You too, although old Zhao is a little old. He's more than enough for you too." Qin Feiyang coughed dryly. "Young master is right. I am a war god. The two of you marrying me is a blessing that you can't cultivate for several lifetimes," Zhao Tailai said proudly. "War god?" Zhao Shuang and Zhao Tailai looked at each other, their eyes full of surprise. "That's right. I am a war god. I am the real deal," Zhao Tailai said. This. The two of them couldn't speak clearly. Why does this bastard have a war god beside him? And he even called him young master. Tang Hai suddenly said, "Since old Zhao likes it, then let's cut the crap. It's decided happily." "Who's decided happily with you? Bastard, you're a war god and a false god, bullying two women like us. What kind of men are you?" Zhao Shuang, and Zhao Tailai suddenly became anxious. "You're wrong. Not a false god, a war god. It's two war gods, a false god and a false god beast," Tang Hai said expressionlessly. "What?" Their eyes widened as they looked at Qin Feiyang and Zhao Tailai. Then their gazes shifted to the golden leopard and Tang Hai. "This emperor is the false god beast," he said. The golden leopard grinned. Tang Hai also said, "I'm also another war god." This, what the hell is going on? The two of them were scared silly. Two war gods, a divine beast. When did this Qin Feiyang have so many terrifying guys around him? You two are just peak 9-star war emperors. In front of us, you're not enough, so be obedient. Qin Feiyang laughed. "Don't. We. Qin Feiyang, you." The two of them were extremely anxious. "Say what you want to say." Qin Feiyang said. "We." The two of them stammered. Qin Feiyang was speechless. He had already scared them like this, and they still didn't take the initiative to confess? If that's the case, then let's be a little more ruthless. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhao Tailai and said, "Old Zhao, I'll make the decision now. You two get married immediately." Feng Ling suddenly became angry and said angrily, "You bastard, are you looking for a beating?" "Aya, that's quite fierce. Old Zhao, can you subdue them?" Qin Feiyang said. "Don't worry, it's just two women. What's the big deal? Watch how I make them obedient." Chapter 1713. Don't come over. Feng Ling Er quickly waved her hand at Zhao Tailai. At the same time, she protected Zhao Shuang, behind her. From this, it could be seen that the two were as close as sisters. And Feng Ling Er was older than Zhao Shuang. So, she was protecting her younger sister as an elder sister. But Zhao Tailai turned a deaf ear. Feng Ling Er was really anxious. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said angrily, "Bastard, tell him to stop." "Why?" Qin Feiyang said lightly. "Because I am Feng Ling Er, and she is Zhao Shuang." Feng Ling Er could no longer hold back the fear in her heart and reported her true identity. "Feng Ling Er? Zhao Shuang er?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at the two and shook his head. "Do you think I am an idiot? The two of them are long dead. Besides, they are much prettier than the two of you. It is really us." Feng Ling Er was anxious. "Humph. Don't think I am so easy to fool. Originally, I just wanted you to marry old Zhao, but you actually dared to pretend to be Ling and Shuang. It is unforgivable. Old Zhao, execute them on the spot." Qin Feiyang shouted. "Yes." Zhao Tailai nodded. Feng Ling Er shouted, "I am not lying to you. We are really Feng Ling Er and Zhao Shuang." "Feiyang, do you still remember when you were framed by Lin Bailey in Iron Ox Town, and were surrounded by Pill Hall, Martial Arts Hall, Lin family and my Zhang family?" Zhao Shuang also quickly said. And Qin Feiyang was stunned. He reached out and said, "Old Zhao, stop first." Zhao Tailai stopped in front of the two. "Are you really Feng Ling Er and Zhao Shuang?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes. The two nodded. "Since you are them, why have you been hiding your identities from me? Besides, I personally witnessed them dying before my eyes." Qin Feiyang said angrily. The two of them stuttered. "This brat. If this goes on, it will definitely drive them crazy." The fire python, who was hiding in the dark, shook its head and laughed. "Speak." Qin Feiyang shouted. "We." The two of them looked at each other, not knowing how to answer. Alas! Feng Ling Er let out a long sigh. She looked at Zhao Shuang and said, "Let's restore our true appearances first." Zhao Shuang nodded. The two of them took out a facial restoration pill and threw it into their mouths. A short while later, two stunning faces appeared before everyone's eyes. Zhao Shuang, slim and graceful. Her jet black hair draped over her shoulders, fluttering in the wind. Her eyes were as clear as a mirror, and she exuded a unique aura. Feng Ling had a pair of white legs that were long and slender. Her figure was exquisite, and her waist was small. There was no extra fat. Her skin was as smooth as cream, shiny and beautiful. "Is it really you?" Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them in a daze. But he was sighing in his heart. After not seeing each other for so many years, the two naive and ignorant girls had become goddess-like existences. Especially Feng Ling Er, her figure was excellent. Of course, Zhao Shuang was also impatient. It was just that some parts were not as exaggerated as Feng Ling Er's. "It's us." Zhao Shuang smiled. You are really not dead." Qin Feiyang had a very excited look on his face. "What? Do you really want us to die?" Feng Ling Er snorted coldly. No. Qin Feiyang quickly waved his hand. Feng Ling Er roared. "Now do you still want us to marry your subordinate?" "If you want to marry, I won't stop you." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Bastard." Feng Ling Er was furious. She stepped forward and twisted Qin Feiyang's ear, gnashing her teeth and saying, "Is it because I haven't beaten you for a long time that your skin is itchy?" The nature of this tigress was revealed. Qin Feiyang secretly complained. Feng Ling Er had been very rough and barbaric since she was a child. He had suffered a lot in front of this woman before. Seeing this, Zhao Shuang quickly grabbed Feng Ling Er's wrist and said, "Sister Ling Er, don't be angry. He must be joking." "Humph. If it weren't for Sister Shuanger's face, I would have castrated you today." Feng Ling Er snorted coldly and finally let go of the devil's claws. Qin Feiyang rubbed his ear and muttered, "After so many years, your personality hasn't changed at all. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to get married?" "What did you say?" Feng Ling Er raised her eyebrows. Nothing, nothing. Qin Feiyang quickly waved his hand. Zhao Tailai walked to Qin Feiyang's side, glanced at Feng Ling'er and said, Young master, even a woman is so afraid of you, you are a little. Don't say it, don't say it, it's all a shadow left from childhood. Qin Feiyang sighed helplessly. Zhao Tailai was speechless and secretly said, Then do we still have to confess to them later? Confess to what? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Of course we already knew their identity. Were we just teasing them? Zhao Tailai said. We can't confess, we can't confess. If they know this, I'm afraid even Zhao Shuang'er will fall out with me. Let alone Feng Ling'er with a fiery temper. Qin Feiyang quickly said. Then how do you plan to end this? You have to know that Ling Yunfei and Luo Qingzhu are cultivating in another castle. When they see Ling Yunfei and Luo Qingzhu, they will immediately know that you are teasing them. Zhao Tailai secretly said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Seeing this, Zhao Tailai laughed and said, Is this considered going for wool and coming home shorn? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Originally, he wanted to tease the two girls, but now he was in an awkward situation. Zhao Shuang'er looked at Qin Feiyang and said apologetically, Sorry, we lied to you for so long. It's okay. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. But he had been thinking about how to end this. Just as Qin Feiyang was racking his brains to think of a way, Tang Hai suddenly said, In fact, the one who should apologize is the young master, because he already knew your identity. Tang Hai, you. Qin Feiyang immediately stared at Tang Hai. Zhao Tailai and the golden leopard decisively retreated to the side, ready to watch the show. As for Tang Hai, he also turned a blind eye to Qin Feiyang's gaze, and silently retreated to Zhao Tailai's side. He revealed an aloof expression as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Qin Feiyang secretly said angrily, You bastard, can't you say a few words less? However, Tang Hai looked as if he didn't hear it. At the same time, Zhao Shuang'er and the golden leopard were also frozen in place. Already knew? Since he knew, why did he have to pretend that he didn't know? Wait. This bastard was teasing them. Qin Feiyang. The next moment, the two gritted their teeth and stared at Qin Feiyang, like two tigresses that were about to explode. It was extremely scary. This. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and retreated. How do you still want to quibble? The two rubbed their fists and walked toward Qin Feiyang step by step, their eyes full of anger. Qin Feiyang pointed to Zhao Tailai and the others and said, It was their idea. It has nothing to do with me. Two people and one beast saw that Qin Feiyang was ready to shift the blame to someone else. They directly turned their heads and put on an expression that said it had nothing to do with them. Qin Feiyang said angrily, Old Zhao, tell me the truth. If you didn't suddenly say that you wanted to marry them, would I tease them? Young master, that's not right. You're clearly the one who instigated this. At most, I can only be regarded as your accomplice. Zhao Tailai said lightly. Yes. If you didn't secretly instruct us, would we dare to tease them like this? Although you are our young master, you can't slander others and be unreasonable. The golden mythological beast said. I'm slandering others? Qin Feiyang was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. You should take responsibility for your own actions. Don't drag us down with you. Tang Hai said coldly. Shut up. You're the worst. Qin Feiyang glared at Tang Hai. Although this guy didn't talk much, every time he opened his mouth, it would kill. You are the one who should shut up. Feng Ling'er couldn't bear it anymore. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws as she pounced at Qin Feiyang. Zhao Shuang'er also looked angry. No, I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Two heroines, please spare me. Qin Feiyang quickly begged for mercy. He couldn't fight back against two women. Therefore, he could only take the initiative to admit his mistake and compromise. Shinbao looked at Qin Feiyang with schadenfreude and said telepathically, Old Tang, you did it on purpose, right? No. Tang Hai shook his head. Stop pretending. You definitely don't like our young master, so you did it on purpose. Shinbao smiled sinisterly. Don't talk nonsense. He is our young master. Even if we don't like him, we can't dislike him. Tang Hai said secretly. Still not admitting? Old Zhao, say something fair. Did old Tang do it on purpose? Shen Bao asked telepathically. This is not important. The important thing is that it is very pleasing to see our young master being abused. Zhao Tailai smiled secretly. Hee, it is indeed pleasing to the eye. Shen Bao smiled sinisterly. After a mournful wail, Feng Ling'er and Zhao Shuanger finally let go of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang awkwardly tidied up his clothes and rolled up his sleeves. His arms were full of bruises caused by Feng Ling'er and Zhao Shuanger. The sharp pain made him grimace. He looked at the two women with dissatisfaction and said, "You are too cruel." "Serves you right." Feng Ling'er rolled her eyes and asked, "How did you know our identity?" "Ling Yunfei and Qingzhu told me." Qin Feiyang rubbed his arms and said. Zhao Shuanger said in surprise, "They have met up with you?" "Yes. Not long after entering the divine site. I met them in Kuanpeng. I was wondering why you hid it from me." Qin Feiyang frowned. Zhao Shuanger said helplessly, "We didn't want to, but this is the old master's order. We can only do it." Qin Feiyang said, "Then the barbaric character you showed before? It was also faked. I was just afraid that if I spent too much time with you, you would notice something." "How is it? I'm good at faking it, right?" Zhao Shuanger smiled playfully. "Very good. However, I still like the original you. In the future, don't be like some tigress. No one dares to marry you." Qin Feiyang glanced at Feng Ling'er and said, "Who are you talking about?" Feng Ling'er immediately frowned. "I didn't name you. Why are you so agitated?" Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. "You." Feng Ling'er was angry again. "Sister Ling'er, calm down, calm down. We've tortured him enough just now. Don't bother with him." Chapter 17-14. Feng Ling'er stared at Qin Feiyang, her beautiful eyes flashing coldly. The atmosphere at the scene was quite solemn. Seeing that the situation was not good, Qin Feiyang decisively sent the two of them into Ling Yunfei's space divine object. The golden divine leopard joked, "Young master, I didn't expect you to be afraid of someone." "Shut up." Qin Feiyang glared at it angrily, then looked at Tang Hai and snorted coldly. "You'd better not speak again in the future. Just be a mute." "Yes." Tang Hai replied respectfully. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Why wasn't it so obedient before? "Brother Qin, have you forgotten?" At this time, the fire python appeared and asked. Qin Feiyang nodded, thought for a while, and said, "Brother Fire, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Tan Wu and the Cerberus. Your friends are my friends. I'll tell the griffin not to make things difficult for them." The fire python laughed. "Thank you." Qin Feiyang was grateful. Suddenly he thought of Dong Xingyang and said, "And Dong Xingyang, please take care of him too." "Dong Xingyang?" The fire python was slightly stunned and said, "I feel that this person is not a good person. Are you sure you want to help him? I feel that he seems to be hiding something in his heart. And it's related to me. Before I figure it out, I don't want him to die." Qin Feiyang said. "Okay." The fire python nodded. An invisible force surged out. The bodies of Qin Feiyang and the others became light, and they immediately appeared on an ancient plaza. The square was not big, and there was a stone door in the middle. All around, the mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the grass and trees were lush. The aura of fierce beasts permeated every corner of the earth. "This is the second floor?" Tang Hai and the golden divine leopard looked at all this in surprise. "Yes." The fire python nodded, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said with a smile, "Brother Qin, then we'll meet again." "See you." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. Whoosh. The next moment, the fire python disappeared before their eyes. Zhao Tailai turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, "Young master, why don't you ask Fire Python to help find Mu Tianyang's current location? And your eldest cousin and the others?" Shen Bao added. "We can't rely on it too much. Moreover, it knows why we came to the second level. If it doesn't have any concerns, it will definitely help us." Qin Feiyang said. "You mean what is it worried about?" Zhao Tailai asked. "When we met it, didn't it say that small beast was not allowed to help us anymore? For it to be able to help us so much on the first floor, it's already very loyal. As friends, we can't make things difficult for it. If it angers the small beast, it will be in danger. Facing a powerful small beast, we can't help it at all. So if you can avoid bothering it now, try not to, Qin Feiyang said. Zhao Tailai nodded and said, Young master, you're really thoughtful. I'm ashamed. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly as he looked at the golden divine leopard and said, There are countless divine beasts on the second floor. You won't be of much help outside. Go and cultivate in the castle first. Castle. Golden divine leopard's eyes lit up. It hadn't entered the castle before, and didn't know if it was as magical as Zhao Tailai said. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and the golden divine beast disappeared instantly. Zhao Tailai tried to fly and found that he could. If he could fly, could he send messages? He immediately suggested Qin Feiyang to try. Qin Feiyang also tried to send messages to Lu Jiajin, the mysterious lady and old Qin, but there was no response at all. Obviously, although they could fly on the second level, they could still use the image crystal. Zhao Tailai said, Try the portal again? Qin Feiyang nodded and took out a portal, but it couldn't be opened. It seems that we can only fly here, Zhao Tailai said regretfully. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile, It's good enough to be able to fly, but there will be some trouble. What trouble? Zhao Tailai looked at him suspiciously. Space divine object. We can fly, so can the space divine object. In this way, it will undoubtedly be more difficult for us to kill Mu Tianyang, Qin Feiyang said. That's true. Zhao Tailai nodded. Don't think too much. Qin Feiyang shook his head and ordered, You guys split up and search the vicinity to see if there are any traces of humans. 3 days later, regardless of whether you find them or not, you all have to come back here and meet me. Yes. The two responded respectfully and quickly disappeared from Qin Feiyang's sight, one to the east and the other to the west. Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze, looked at the undead next to him, and said with a smile, Since you are following me, shouldn't you also contribute? The undead glanced around and flew to the north without saying a word. You have quite a character. Qin Feiyang shook his head with a smile and followed into the castle. The golden divine leopard wandered around the castle, his eyes full of suspicion. When he saw Qin Feiyang appear, he transmitted his voice. Your castle is so small? He transmitted his voice because he was afraid of disturbing everyone who was in seclusion. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. It's really hard to imagine that such a small broken place actually has a time formation. The golden divine leopard muttered. Broken place? Qin Feiyang was speechless. He had no idea how many people were drooling over his ancient castle. Yet this guy was still looking down on it. Boom. Suddenly, a terrifying aura burst out from his body. Qin Feiyang was stunned and hurriedly turned his head to look. He saw Lu Zheng's long hair fluttering in the wind, his clothes ragged, and his aura crazily soaring. I finally broke through, Qin Feiyang murmured. Boom. The next moment, Lu Zheng's aura rose to the peak state. Haha. Little cousin, how is it? You stepped into the peak state so quickly. Your brother is awesome, right? Lu Zheng also opened his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smug smile. Tisk. Qin Feiyang is already a pseudo-god. You are just a peak 9-star combat emperor. What is there to be proud of? Before Qin Feiyang could speak, the golden divine leopard scorned. Lu Zheng was stunned, looked at the golden divine leopard, and said angrily, Where did this kitten come from? Kitten? Kid, do I look like a kitten to you? The golden divine leopard suddenly became angry. Lu Zheng ignored it and looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Where are we now? The second floor. Qin Feiyang said. Then hurry up and find my brother, Lu Zheng said. He was quite worried. I know. Qin Feiyang nodded. Then send me to Ling Yunfei's space divine item. I have to step into the immortal state as soon as possible. Otherwise, I will be laughed at by some people who look down on me. Lu Zheng glanced at the golden divine leopard and snorted coldly. Who are you scolding? The golden divine leopard was furious and pounced on Lu Zheng with bared fangs and brandished claws. But before it pounced, Lu Jing asked Qin Feiyang to send it to Ling Yunfei's castle. The golden divine leopard shouted unhappily, "Kid, ask him to come out. Let's fight for 300 rounds." Bang! Qin Feiyang immediately smacked the golden divine leopard's head fiercely. Junior leopard was in so much pain that it grimaced. Qin Feiyang looked down at the golden divine leopard and frowned. "Why do I find that you are not easy to deal with? You only found out now." The golden divine leopard snorted through its nose. "You are not ashamed, but proud of it?" Qin Feiyang was speechless. He ignored it and took out the axe. The golden divine leopard went up. When it saw that it was a rusty axe, it immediately mocked. "Young master, are you crazy? How can you keep a rusty axe like a treasure?" "Rusty," Qin Feiyang murmured. A sly look flashed in his eyes. He handed the axe to the golden divine leopard and said with a smile, "Then do you dare to touch the blade of this broken axe?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" The golden divine leopard smiled disdainfully. It stretched out its claws and pressed against the blade of the axe. In order to prove how awesome it was, it used extra strength. But when it touched the blade of the axe, it realized that something was wrong. It was too late for regrets. Its claws were cut in half. It felt a sharp pain. It hurriedly retracted its claws. It was almost cut off. At that moment, it looked down at the axe, no longer looking down on it. Its eyes were filled with shock. How could a rusty axe be so sharp? How is it? Do you still dare to look down on it? Qin Feiyang looked at the golden divine leopard mockingly. The golden divine leopard glared at Qin Feiyang and said, "You deliberately played with me. Didn't you look down on it?" "Of course, I have to let you see its power." Qin Feiyang laughed. "Bastard." The golden divine leopard cursed. "Some things can't be seen on the surface." Qin Feiyang glanced at it, and then looked down at the axe. The axe was still stained with the golden divine leopard's blood. But, just like before, the axe did not absorb the golden divine leopard's blood. The blood dripped down the rust and onto the floor of the ancient castle. And the rust on it did not disappear at all. The golden divine leopard said in a deep voice, "This axe is not simple. Did you find it in the ancient world?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and took out a dagger, wanting to scrape off the rust on the axe. But he was shocked to find that these rust stains seemed to be fixed on the axe and could not be removed. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and tried all kinds of methods, but he could not remove the rust on the axe. If Chang Shui was still here, it would definitely be able to remove these rust stains. What a pity. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Chang Shui had fallen into the hands of small beast. How could he get it back? Temporarily putting away the axe, he took out a Qiankuan bag. It was the Qiankuan bag that Guizixiong gave him. With a wave of his hand, pieces of soul stones immediately flew out of the Qiankuan bag and piled up on the ground. After a careful count, there were actually a total of 570 soul stones. In addition to the 30 he found himself, there were a total of 600 soul stones. What is this? The golden divine leopard glanced at the soul stones in surprise. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, "This is called a soul stone. It has the effect of condensing divine sense. The energy of this soul stone is comparable to hundreds of spirit congealing pills with 5 or 6 veins." What? Chapter 17:15. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang immediately kicked it. The golden leopard immediately flew out and hit the wall behind it with a bang. It immediately felt dizzy. It got up, shook its head and glared at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, "Let me tell you, don't even think about getting a single one of these soul stones." The golden leopard's face immediately changed, and its eyes were full of flattery. "Young master, you see, stop, stop, stop." Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand and rubbed his forehead. He looked at Junior Leopard unhappily and said, "At most 50. If he didn't give it to it, it would definitely pester him endlessly." Okay. "Thank you, young master. If you need any help in the future, just let me know. I'll definitely do my best." The golden leopard laughed and quickly ran up to grab the 50 soul stones. It was overjoyed. "Don't give me empty promises. Breaking through to the war god realm as soon as possible is the greatest help you can give me. Qin Feiyang said. Don't worry. I'll definitely cultivate in seclusion seriously. The golden divine leopard stood up and patted his chest as he vowed solemnly. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly and put away all the soul stones. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground and took out a soul stone. He held it in his hand and began to refine and absorb it. The majestic energy was like a torrent that flowed through his palm and arm, and into his sea of consciousness. Strands of brand new divine consciousness were born immediately. This energy is indeed amazing. The golden leopard suddenly exclaimed. Qin Feiyang opened his eyes and turned his head. He saw the golden leopard sitting cross-legged like a human. That funny look made him want to laugh. Immediately, he calmed down and continued to refine. Time passed by slowly. An hour later, the soul stone in his hand suddenly shattered. The energy inside had been completely absorbed by him. The golden leopard also refined the first soul stone. Its eyebrows were full of surprise and it immediately began to refine the second one. Qin Feiyang was deep in thought. After refining the first soul stone, he finally came to the conclusion that this soul stone would allow him to form 100 strands of divine sense. This result made him both happy and worried. What made him happy was that he still had 550 soul stones, after giving the golden divine leopard 50 soul stones. One could condense 100 strands of divine consciousness. 550 soul stones could condense 55,000 strands of divine consciousness. In other words, as long as he finished refining these soul stones, he would be able to step into the 5th stage of the false god realm. What worried him the most was that 550 soul stones were far from enough for him to step into the war god realm. This was because in order to step into the war god realm, one had to condense 100,000 strands of divine sense. In other words, even if he refined these 550 soul stones, he would still need more than 40,000 strands of divine consciousness, which was almost half of the total. He could not help but feel a little regretful. Why didn't he ask Guo Zixiong to get more? He pondered for a moment. Qin Feiyang suddenly raised his head and looked at Willow Tree, Li Jian, Cui Li, the 6 elders, and Yu Huang, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. Willow Tree had said before that he was still at the 2nd stage of the false god realm. These soul stones were not enough for him to directly step into the war god realm. Li Jian had just broken into the false god realm, and was only at the 1st stage. It was even more impossible. As for Yu Huang, although he did not say which stage his cultivation was at, according to the Golden Wolf King, he had just broken through, so it was definitely not enough. That left only the 6 elders, Cui Li and Junior Leopard. That's right. He wanted the person with the highest cultivation to refine these soul stones, because this way, he could create another war god in the shortest amount of time. Qin Feiyang said, 6 elders, Cui Li, Junior Leopard, tell me which stage of the false god realm are you at? The golden divine leopard opened his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously, asking, what are you trying to do? The 6 elders and Cui Li also opened their eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang glared at Junior Leopard and said angrily, I asked you to speak, so speak. What's with all this nonsense? The golden divine leopard said, my cultivation is at stage 8. Stage 8. Qin Feiyang was shocked. He did not realize that Junior Leopard was so strong. Stage 8 meant that Junior Leopard had already condensed 80,000 strands of divine consciousness. Qin Feiyang asked, how many strands of divine consciousness do you have? More than 88,000 strands. The golden divine leopard said. More than 88,000 strands, Qin Feiyang murmured. In other words, Junior Leopard only needed to refine 120 soul stones to step into the war god realm. This was really an unexpected surprise. What about you guys? Qin Feiyang looked at Cui Li and the 6 elders. One of the elders said, the 6 of us are between stage 2 and stage 4. Not enough. Qin Feiyang shook his head and looked at Cui Li. Cui Li said, I'm at stage 6. I have 64,000 strands of divine consciousness. Stage 6? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Then a trace of joy appeared on his face. 64,000 strands of divine consciousness. In other words, Cui Li still needed 36,000 strands of divine consciousness. In other words, Chui Li only needed to refine 360 soul stones to step into the war god realm. He had a total of 600 soul stones in his hands, including the one he had refined before. Chui Li had 360 soul stones and Junior Leopard had 120 soul stones. In total, he only had 480 soul stones. In other words, even if he gave them to Chui Li and Junior Leopard, he would still have more than 100 left. He could actually create 2 war gods. This was a result that he never expected. Qin Feiyang was pleasantly surprised. But suddenly he frowned slightly. Would the soul stone's effect become weaker and weaker as he refined it? Qin Feiyang looked at Junior Leopard and asked, "How much divine consciousness did you condense after refining the first soul stone?" "A total of 100 strands. In the past, it would take me at least half a year to condense a strand of divine consciousness. But now, in this short period of time, I condensed 100 strands. The energy of this soul stone is really beyond my imagination," Junior Leopard said, extremely excited. 100 strands. Same as me. The effect of the soul stone did not weaken. Qin Feiyang muttered and decisively took out another 70 soul stones and threw them to Junior Leopard. "What do you mean?" The golden divine leopard was stunned. Qin Feiyang said, "Nonsense, of course it's for you to break through the war god realm." The golden divine leopard was stunned. What was going on? Previously, he didn't even want to give it 1 soul stone. Now he actually gave it 70 at once? Was his head kicked by a donkey? But here there were many beasts but no donkeys. Qin Feiyang counted 360 soul stones and gave them to Chui Li. Chui Li also froze on the spot. He never thought that Qin Feiyang would actually give him soul stones. The 6 elders and Li Jian also looked at each other. What was going on? Although they had been cultivating, they had already heard the conversation between Qin Feiyang and Junior Leopard from the beginning. At that time, they also thought of asking Qin Feiyang for some soul stones to cultivate. But then again, soul stones were so precious. Qin Feiyang probably wouldn't give them to them. Moreover, it was also because of Qin Feiyang that they were able to break free from the shackles of the evil devil's mark, and once again step on the path of cultivation. So they were too embarrassed to ask Qin Feiyang. But unexpectedly, now Qin Feiyang actually took out a large number of soul stones and gave them to Chui Li and Junior Leopard. He himself only had a little more than 100 left. "Young master, what are you doing? These soul stones can only be found by chance. How would I dare to take them? You should keep them for yourself to refine." Chui Li came back to his senses and quickly looked at Qin Feiyang. "Idiot, don't you understand young master's good intentions?" Willow Tree suddenly opened his eyes, looked at Chui Li and Junior Leopard, and snorted coldly. Chui Li and Junior Leopard looked at Willow Tree in confusion. "Why didn't young master give me, Yu Huang, Li Jian, and the 6 elders the soul stones, but only the 2 of you?" "This is because the 2 of you can use the energy of the soul stones to break through to the war god level. And me, Yu Huang, Li Jian, and the 6 elders don't have enough cultivation. Even if we refine all the soul stones, we won't be able to step into the war god level. In short, young master gave the soul stones to the 2 of you, because he wants you to step into the war god level first," Willow Tree said. "So it's like this." Chui Li and Junior Leopard finally understood. Chui Li stood up and bowed. "Young master, thank you for your trust in me. I will work hard and strive to step into the war god level as soon as possible." Junior Leopard hesitated and also looked at Qin Feiyang. "I won't say any flattering words. I will only say one thing. I would rather betray the world than betray you." I didn't expect that a beast like you could say something so profound." Willow Tree looked at Junior Leopard in surprise. "Betray the world than betray you." The meaning of these words was very obvious. It would rather betray everyone in the world than betray Qin Feiyang. It could be said that no words could express loyalty better than these words. Of course. And Junior Leopard's determination. It was swearing, declaring that it would truly submit to Qin Feiyang and integrate into this small team. Subsequently, Chui Li and Junior Leopard began to concentrate on refining the soul stones. Qin Feiyang still had 119 soul stones left in his hands. After thinking for a while, he simply gave them to Willow Tree and Yu Huang. Willow Tree and Yu Huang were the first to follow him after he entered the miracle, other than the Crocodile Emperor and a few other beasts. It could be said that Willow Tree and Yu Huang had made great contributions to him along the way. Since there were benefits, he naturally couldn't forget them. Willow Tree looked at the soul stones in front of it and frowned. Young master, what about you? You becoming stronger is equivalent to me becoming stronger. Is there a difference? Qin Feiyang laughed and got up to leave the ancient castle. He concealed his aura and swept towards the south like a ghost. Zhao Tailai and the other two went to the east, west, and north respectively. Naturally, he could only go to the south. At the same time, in the ancient castle, Willow Tree and Yu Huang looked down at the soul stones in front of them and couldn't calm down for a long time. After a while, Willow Tree looked up at Cui Li, Junior Leopard Li Jian, and the 6 elders and said in a deep voice, "Young master is good to everyone. I believe you all have a deep understanding now. I hope that you all will never repay kindness with enmity." Willow Tree is right. If I find out in the future that anyone dares to go against me or even betray Boss Qin, I will be the first to not let him off. Yu Huang followed with a strong murderous intent in his eyes. Chapter 17-16. Let's talk about Qin Feiyang. Along the way to the south, he saw too many beasts. And in 10 beasts, at least 2 were pseudo-god level beasts. And the beast emperors in each area were all war god level existences. Every time he encountered such a beast emperor, Qin Feiyang would take a detour. Not to mention beast emperors, even if he encountered a pseudo-god level beast, he didn't dare to provoke it. Because once a beast discovered him, then the beast emperor would also receive the news very quickly. However, although there were constant dangers along the way, he also encountered a lot of medicinal herbs. Each medicinal herb was more than 10,000 years old. There were even some that were more than 100,000 years old. Even the most ordinary medicinal herb, if taken to the outside world, could be auctioned for an astonishing price. Qin Feiyang naturally wouldn't miss it. As long as he saw it, he would immediately think of ways to take it away and plant it in Ling Yunfei's spatial divine item. In fact, he also thought about opening up a medicinal field in the Black Tortoise world, but he had been hesitating. After all, the population of the Black Tortoise world was more than 100 million, and there were even pseudo-gods. No one could predict what would happen in the future. Even if he wanted to open up a medicinal field, he had to find a hidden place. In a flash, 2 days passed. On the morning of the 3rd day, Qin Feiyang wandered around in a mountain range and was ready to return the way he came. But suddenly, an invisible aura caught his attention. This aura was invisible and colorless, and it filled the void, making him feel very familiar. He found a commanding height, closed his eyes, and carefully sensed for a moment, and his eyes suddenly lit up. This was the energy emitted by the Tree of Creation. It came from the front left. However, in the forest in the front left, he also sensed a terrifying fierce power. It was the fierce power of a war god level beast. Obviously, this mountain range was the territory of a divine beast. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, gritted his teeth, and said, "How can you catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den?" He immediately activated the concealment technique and followed the direction of the Tree of Creation's energy. Soon, he came to the sky above the forest. There were groups of trees and vines. The ground was covered with a thick layer of dead branches and rotten leaves, emitting a rotten smell. Within the forest, one could occasionally find traces of ferocious beasts. There were warlord-level beasts. There were also battle saint-level beasts. Of course, there must be demigod-ranked dire beasts as well. Some of them were looking for food. Some of them were lying on rocks, basking in the sun comfortably. There were also some ferocious beasts sleeping soundly. However, none of the beasts discovered the existence of Qin Feiyang. Even when Qin Feiyang passed by them, they didn't notice him at all. A short while later, Qin Feiyang finally arrived at the central area of the jungle and held his breath. Directly below, There was a pool of water that was more than 100 feet wide. The pond water was as clear as a mirror. Under the gentle breeze, the waves rippled. Beside the pond, a giant python was lying on its stomach. The giant python's body was more than 10 meters long. Its entire body was black, and it exuded a despairing aura. The divine beast aura that Qin Feiyang had sensed before originated from this giant python. It was obvious. It was the emperor of this mountain range, a warlord-level divine python. And more than 10 meters away from the giant python, there was a tree of good fortune. The trunk of the tree of good fortune was as thick as a thigh, swaying in the wind. On the branches, there were more than 10 fruits of good fortune hanging. These fruits of good fortune had already matured. Between the grass on the ground, there were 5 or 6 rotten fruits of good fortune. What a waste of natural resources. Qin Feiyang looked at this scene and shook his head. Casually taking out a fruit of fortune would cause a bloodbath. But this divine python was like garbage, letting it rot on the ground. Qin Feiyang looked at the divine python again. Suddenly, a trace of surprise crept into his eyes. He didn't notice before that there were 2 black horns on both sides of the divine python's head. This isn't a giant python? Qin Feiyang was startled. He changed his direction and looked at the python's abdomen. To his astonishment, he discovered 4 jet black sharp claws. Moreover, he also found pieces of black scales that were shaped like dragon scales on the divine python's body. This is a flood dragon. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. With horns on the head, claws on the belly, and a body like a snake, this was a black flood dragon. What a headache! Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. The strength of a flood dragon was naturally stronger than that of a python. Not to mention that it was a warlord-level flood dragon. Of course, it didn't mean that all pythons were inferior to flood dragons. For example, Yu Huang. As a different kind of snake, it was not inferior to a flood dragon. And he also sensed that there was a faint aura of divine power in the void around the tree of good fortune. He guessed. The black flood dragon should have set up an invisible divine power boundary around the tree of good fortune. If there was really a boundary, then he wouldn't be able to get close to the tree of good fortune without anyone noticing. In other words, now he had to first confirm whether there was a divine power boundary around the tree of good fortune. He tiptoed towards the tree of good fortune. Buzz. Before he got close, suddenly a boundary appeared. The black flood dragon that was lying on the ground suddenly opened its eyes. Its divine sense emerged and rushed towards the tree of good fortune. There really is a boundary. Qin Feiyang was shocked and entered the black tortoise boundary without hesitation. The ancient castle couldn't hide from the divine sense, but the black tortoise boundary could. Why is there a reaction from the boundary? The black flood dragon couldn't find Qin Feiyang, nor did it find any ferocious beasts nearby. It couldn't help but feel suspicious. But soon, it retracted its divine sense and went back to sleep. The boundary also quickly disappeared into the void. Qin Feiyang also appeared again. He glanced at the tree of good fortune, then looked at the black flood dragon. It seemed that he had to think of a way to escape unscathed. Suddenly, he patted his head lightly. Wouldn't it be fine to trick the black flood dragon away? As long as the black flood dragon left, he would have time to use the ancient castle to break the boundary. Immediately, he stretched out his hands. With a thought, Yu Huang immediately appeared in his palms. When Yu Huang was in the ancient castle, its body would usually shrink to half a meter or half a foot long. Sensing the black flood dragon's aura, its pupils suddenly shrank. It sent a voice transmission. What are you doing? Do you see that tree of good fortune? Qin Feiyang asked secretly. Yu Huang glanced at the tree of good fortune and said secretly, Are you crazy? You actually dare to have ideas about it. Do you know that your current actions are like pulling a tooth from a tiger's mouth? Qin Feiyang sent a voice transmission. It's not like we haven't done this before. What are you afraid of? How can the past be the same as now? You have to know that it's not a battle emperor, nor a false god. It's a battle god level flood dragon. If we're caught by it, we'll definitely die, Yu Huang said secretly. Don't make me look down on you. Qin Feiyang sent a voice transmission. A row of black lines appeared on Yu Huang's forehead. It said snappily, Fine, fine, fine. For the sake of my face, I'll accompany you in your madness. What do you want me to do? Qin Feiyang explained the situation briefly. Then he said, go somewhere far away and make some noise to lure it over. What the hell? Aren't you asking me to be the bait? Definitely not. Yu Huang shook its head like it was pounding garlic. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, aren't you able to turn invisible? What are you afraid of? I'm not turning invisible. I'm just changing the color of my skin. There's no way I can escape from this fellow's divine consciousness. Yu Huang said secretly. What a headache. Fine, then you stay here. I'll go lure it away. But you have to promise that you'll get the tree of good fortune. Qin Feiyang sent a voice transmission. Yu Huang said confidently, as long as you can lure it away, the tree of good fortune will be ours. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. He quietly took Yu Huang and retreated a distance, then entered the forest and handed the castle to Yu Huang. After Baiming, Yu Huang kept the ancient castle. She entered a patch of grass and vanished from sight. Qin Feiyang rose into the air again and retreated to the edge of the forest. Then, without saying a word, he waved his hand and a pseudo-god force rushed out and blasted into a giant mountain next to him. The giant mountain, which was more than 1,000 feet high, suddenly collapsed, and the rumbling sound echoed in all directions. Roar! Immediately, a series of beast roars sounded in the forest. Several pseudo-god level beasts immediately rushed out of the forest and floated in the air, looking at the collapsed giant mountain. Their eyes were full of surprise. One of the pseudo-god level beasts shouted angrily, who is so reckless to dare to make trouble in our territory? Boom! Immediately after, divine consciousness emerged and rolled toward the collapsed giant mountain. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang immediately entered the Black Tortoise world. The castle couldn't escape the search of divine consciousness, but the Black Tortoise world could. He stood in the Black Tortoise world and looked at the scene outside, waiting for the Black Dragon to arrive. But after waiting for a while, the Black Dragon didn't appear. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was stunned. After failing to find anything, the demigod realm beasts also gradually dispersed. Qin Feiyang left the Black Tortoise world and quickly rushed to the place where he separated from Yu Huang. He whispered, Yu Huang, where are you? Before his voice faded, Qin Feiyang saw Yu Huang climb up from the grass. This place wasn't far from the Black Dragon. He could clearly see the Black Dragon's situation. What's going on? Qin Feiyang grabbed Yu Huang and transmitted his voice. I don't know either. Just now it did hear the commotion, but it only raised its head to take a look before continuing to sleep. Yu Huang thought. Seems like the commotion wasn't big enough. Qin Feiyang mumbled. Why go through so much trouble? Let's just run over and destroy the barrier in front of it, steal the tree of fortune, then enter the Black Tortoise world and leave. What can it do to us? Yu Huang coldly snorted. No. These beasts have lived here for a long time. The beast emperors must be very familiar with each other. If it knows that we stole the tree of fortune, it will join forces with the other beast emperors to hunt us down. Then we can only hide in the Black Tortoise world, Qin Feiyang said. Yu Huang frowned and helplessly said, all right then, go and make a bigger commotion. Qin Feiyang nodded and quietly retreated, crazily bombarding the surrounding mountains. Rumble, crack, mountains collapsed one after another, and the deafening sound shook the surroundings. Bastard! There's no end to this, is there? Accompanied by a series of angry roars, ferocious beasts charged out one after another, their divine senses enveloping the world. The pseudo-god level beasts that appeared before were among them, but after scanning every corner with their divine sense, they didn't find any suspicious aura. Who's behind this? Chapter 17:17. Boom. At the same time, in the central area of the forest, a terrifying divine aura erupted. Whoosh. Immediately after, a beast shadow teleported over at lightning speed. It was Wuxiao, Lord Wuxiao. The beasts that gathered above the forest immediately prostrated themselves respectfully in the void. You're finally here. The Black Tortoise world. Looking at Wuxiao, Qin Feiyang smiled slightly and immediately controlled the black tortoise world to quietly rush towards the central area. What's going on? Outside. Wu Jiao glanced at the devastated land with a dissatisfied look. I don't know. As soon as we heard the commotion, we immediately came out and used our divine sense to search, but we didn't find anything. The beasts shook their heads. Wu Jiao heard this and his eyes became even more terrifying. He shouted loudly, "Stop hiding. I've already found you, get out quickly." Where is it? The group of beasts was stunned and quickly scanned their surroundings. They also admired Wu Jiao very much. They had searched for a long time, but found nothing. But Wu Jiao found the other party's trace as soon as he arrived. As a beast emperor, he was indeed different. At the same time, hearing Wu Jiao's shout, Qin Feiyang also revealed a look of surprise. How could he be discovered? One had to know. His divine sense couldn't capture the black tortoise world at all. Moreover, Wu Jiao didn't release his divine sense just now. He waved his hand and the scene changed. Wu Jiao immediately entered the scene. Immediately. His expression was one of astonishment. Wu Jiao was actually behind his back. If he was really discovered, shouldn't he be facing him now? Immediately. He immediately understood what was going on. It turned out that Wu Jiao was tricking him. He was quite smart. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He controlled the black tortoise world and continued to rush towards the tree of creation. Boom. About 5 or 6 minutes later, in the central area of the forest, a deafening loud noise suddenly sounded. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Obviously, Yu Huang had already made his move. Wu Jiao naturally also heard it. He turned around and looked at the central area in surprise. Not good. This is a plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Its expression changed abruptly, and it immediately used teleportation to fly toward the central area. The other ferocious beasts looked at each other and followed. Simultaneously, beside the tree of creation, the barrier of Wu Jiao's divine power had been shattered by the ancient castle. Yu Huang floated at the side, his eyes shining. When this Wu Jiao comes back and sees that the tree of fortune is still there, he will definitely be so angry that he will vomit blood. It laughed evilly, and the power of a fake god surged, pouncing toward the fortune tree. Whoosh! At this moment, a white figure appeared out of nowhere. Yu Huang chuckled and said, "You're pretty quick. You came here so quickly." But when it finished speaking, it realized that it was not Qin Feiyang, but a white-haired old man. "Who are you?" Yu Huang suddenly shouted. However, the white-haired elder did not say a word. He grabbed the tree of fortune and uprooted it. "How dare you?" Yu Huang turned pale with fright. "How dare you snatch something from me? You're courting death." In an instant, Baiming Yu Huang revealed her true form. His body that was a few hundred feet tall was like a mountain ridge, exuding a shocking ferocious aura. What's going on? Qin Feiyang sensed Yu Huang's aura and his face was filled with shock. Wu Jiao's eyes were also extremely gloomy. "Old fart, put down the tree of fortune." Yu Huang roared and raised its gigantic tail, smashing it toward the white-haired elder. "Emph." The white-haired elder snorted coldly, raised his old arm, and slapped Yu Huang's gigantic tail. Boom. Yu Huang was sent flying by the elder's slap. Yu Huang was shocked and furious. This person's strength was far stronger than it had expected. However, the white-haired elder did not continue fighting. After sending Yu Huang flying, he immediately disappeared with the tree of fortune. Yu Huang raised his brows and his spirit consciousness surged. In an instant, he captured a space divine item in the void. He immediately prepared to chase after it. However, right then, boom, a terrifying divine might descended. Yu Huang was immediately imprisoned in the void, unable to move. Wu Jiao had arrived above Yu Huang before Qin Feiyang with an extremely sinister gaze. So fast. Qin Feiyang was surprised. However, on second thought he understood. Even though he had arrived here earlier than Wu Jiao, it had to be known that Wu Jiao was a true divine beast, and its speed was several times faster than his. Yu Huang became nervous when he saw Wu Jiao. Wu Jiao lowered its head and scanned the ground. There was only a pit left where the tree of fortune used to be. It looked at Yu Huang and said coldly, So you're the one behind this. Hand over the tree of fortune. Yu Huang hurriedly said, Brother, this is a misunderstanding. I just happened to pass by here. The one who took the tree of fortune was an old man. Old man? Wu Jiao raised his brows. At this moment, Qin Feiyang also rushed over. He placed the black tortoise realm beside Baiming Yu Huang and stared at the surroundings as he furrowed his brows. Why is there an old man here? Yu Huang urged. He has a space divine item. Quickly release your spirit consciousness. It's not too late to chase after him. Seeing that Yu Huang did not seem to be lying, Wu Jiao immediately released his spirit consciousness in all directions. Immediately, Wu Jiao was stunned. There really is a space divine item? The next moment, its eyes were filled with murderous intent. Then, it brought Yu Huang with it and flickered in the void. In a few breaths, they appeared thousands of miles away. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang hurriedly controlled the black tortoise realm and chased after them. Behind them, the group of pseudo-god level beasts also followed. Yu Huang said anxiously, Brother, I'm really just a passerby. Can you let me go? Wu Jiao said, When I find out that you are indeed innocent, I will let you go. Although he didn't release Baiming Yu Huang, the pressure binding Baiming Yu Huang weakened by a lot. Yu Huang was helpless. He also hated the white-robed old man in his heart. If it wasn't for this old man, how could he have fallen into Wu Jiao's hands? Damn old man, don't let me catch you. Otherwise, I'll let you know why the flowers are so red. Yu Huang snorted in his heart. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. 10 breaths later, Wu Jiao's body shook violently. A terrifying divine power appeared and turned into a huge barrier that shrouded the void in front of them. When the barrier fell, Wu Jiao also stopped outside of it with Yu Huang. Yu Huang released his divine sense and immediately captured the spatial divine item inside the barrier. He sneered. Why don't you keep running? However, the white-haired old man did not appear. No sound came out. Yu Huang raised his eyebrows and turned to Wu Jiao, asking, Brother, with your strength, you should be able to break open that spatial divine item, right? Don't call me brother all the time. Am I close to you? Besides, with your strength, what right do you have to call me brother? Call me Lord Jiao Emperor from now on. Understand? Wu Jiao said. Yes, yes. Yu Huang nodded. A wise man knows when to retreat. Wu Jiao nodded in satisfaction and looked up at the barrier. His eyes flashed coldly. His divine sense had been locked onto the spatial divine item. Do you think I can't do anything to you if you hide in there? Wu Jiao suddenly sneered. Clang! Accompanied by a loud sound, a golden scale flew out of Wu Jiao's body. The scale was the size of an adult's palm and looked as if it was cast in gold. Furthermore, once the scales appeared, a world-destroying sharpness enveloped the entire region. Yu Huang, who was at the side, couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fear in her heart when she sensed the terrifying sharpness. He looked up at the scale and his eyes flashed. This was not an ordinary scale. It was a dragon scale, because he could clearly feel a wisp of extremely pure dragon force on the scale. And this was a dragon scale that had been forged into a divine artifact. A reverse scale and a normal dragon scale were two completely different concepts. Dragon scales. Every dragon had quite a few of them. However, every mystical dragon only had one reverse scale. The toughness and hardness of the reverse scale were also far superior to other dragon scales. Yu Huang's previous divine artifact was also a scale. Therefore, he could determine that the reverse dragon scale in Wu Jiao's hand was at least several times more powerful than the one he had before. Boom! Divine power surged out and poured into the reverse scale. Whether it was the aura or the dragon force, they all soared in an instant, showing a scene of destruction. Qin Feiyang and the group of pseudo-god-level ferocious beasts also caught up. Looking at the reverse scale, there was fear in their eyes that could not be dispelled. Wu Jiao looked at the barrier and shouted, I'll give you one last chance. Come out and accept your death. Who is it? Qin Feiyang looked around and scanned the void inside the barrier. He had been secretly observing for so long and did not notice anyone hiding in the dark. This person must have had his eyes on the tree of creation. And if he was not wrong, he had discovered the tree of creation before him. Inside the barrier, there was no movement. However, just as the reverse scale rushed into the barrier, the white-haired old man appeared out of thin air. How could it be him? Qin Feiyang's face was full of astonishment. Yu Huang also shouted at the same time. It's him. Wu Jiao looked at the white-haired old man. Originally, its expression was filled with disdain. However, when his eyes met the white-haired old man, his pupils suddenly shrank slightly. Whoosh. The white-haired old man glanced at Yu Huang and Wu Jiao, then took a step forward, and easily avoided the attack of the reverse scale. Immediately after, he slapped the barrier with his palm, and with a crack, the barrier was immediately shattered. So strong? Yu Huang was dumbfounded. The strength displayed by the white-haired old man was even more terrifying than before. He broke the barrier set up by Wu Jiao with one palm. Could it be? A terrifying thought suddenly appeared in his mind. He looked at Wu Jiao again. His expression was also quite solemn. After the white-haired old man smashed the barrier, he did not stop and left without looking back. Yu Huang murmured, Lord Jiao Huang, he can't be a war god, right? He is a war god. Wu Jiao said in a deep voice. Damn. Yu Huang broke out in cold sweat for a moment. Fortunately, when he was fighting for the tree of creation, this old man did not kill him. Otherwise he would have become a corpse by now. But even if he is a war god, he can't take anything from me. Wu Jiao's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Yes. How dare he steal from you, Lord Jiao Huang? He is simply courting death. I support you mentally. Go. Chapter 17-18. It couldn't wait for Wu Jiao and the white-haired old man to fight. Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai were not here. It was almost impossible for Wu Jiao and Qin Feiyang to take back the tree of creation from the white-haired old man. So, it fanned the flames and instigated Wu Jiao. Only when Wu Jiao and the white-haired old man fought would Wu Jiao and Qin Feiyang have a chance. Wu Jiao glanced at Tan He, then turned to the group of pseudo-god level beasts and shouted, Come here and watch him. If he escapes, I'll hold you responsible. Yes. The group of ferocious beasts nodded and surrounded Yu Huang. Yu Huang looked a little flustered, but his heart was full of disdain. A group of pseudo-god level beasts wanted to watch him? Dream on. Whoosh. Wu Jiao immediately rushed toward the white-haired old man with the reverse scale. The white-haired old man raised his eyebrows and turned to look at Wu Jiao. Is it necessary for a tree of creation? It's not about the tree of creation anymore, it's about dignity. You broke into my territory and took the tree of creation in front of everyone. If I let you leave like this, where will I put my face in the future? Wu Jiao shouted coldly. The reverse scale glowed brightly and charged toward the white-haired old man with a shocking sharpness. Its aura was firmly locked onto the white-haired old man. In other words, the white-haired old man could no longer hide. Because no matter where he hid, the reverse scale would follow. And he didn't dare to enter the space divine item again. Because the reverse scale's sharpness was enough to destroy a low-level space divine item in an instant. The white-haired old man's eyes darkened and he snorted. I just happen to be lacking a mount. You're quite suitable. You're courting death. Wu Jiao was furious. For a war god level ferocious beast like it, the word mount was a blatant insult to it. You're the one courting death, not me. The white-haired old man sneered and waved his hand. With a loud clang, a 3-foot sword appeared out of thin air. The sword was 3 fingers wide. It was pure white as if it was made of divine jade. It was quite beautiful. But at the same time, it was also very terrifying. The terrifying sharpness had yet to recover, but it was already tearing the void apart. Divine artifact. Yu Huang's eyes shone even brighter than before. Clang. The white-haired old man grabbed the sword and the false divinity surged into it. The sword was instantly awakened. He slashed with his sword. Clang. The moment the blade and the reverse scale collided, dazzling sparks burst out. Streaks of destructive sword chi and sharpness rushed out in all directions with an earth-shattering momentum. Seeing this, Yu Huang turned to the group of semi-divinity realm beasts and barked. Why aren't you running? Do you want to die? The group of ferocious beasts quivered and immediately turned to run. Just as they turned around, Qin Feiyang appeared, grabbed Yu Huang, and returned to the Black Tortoise realm. By the time those ferocious beasts reacted, Yu Huang was already long gone. This bastard is really cunning. Quick, look for him. Does he also have a spatial divine item? Although they were a little careless before, Yu Huang definitely couldn't have escaped in such a short time. He must be hiding somewhere. And a spatial divine item was the best place to hide. However, when they released their divine senses to search the surrounding void and every corner of the ground below, they still couldn't find any trace of Yu Huang or the spatial divine item. A bunch of idiots. When Wu Jiao discovered that Yu Huang had taken the opportunity to escape, it immediately roared at the group of semi-divinity realm beasts. But now, it didn't have the time to look for Yu Huang. Clang. Divine power surged, and the reverse scale of the dragon rapidly recovered. The white-haired old man didn't fall behind at all. The battle sword in his hand was extremely sharp. One man and one beast controlled the two divine artifacts as they charged into the sky. The void collapsed and the sky shattered. Terrifying destructive fluctuations enveloped the entire world like a torrent of beasts. Not a single ferocious beast could get close to them. But the Black Tortoise realm was floating in the void not far away from them. I didn't expect that after all these years, not only did he break through to the Divine War realm on the second floor, but he also obtained a divine artifact comparable to the Divine Phoenix Blade. Qin Feiyang looked at the white-haired old man in the image and sighed. You know him? Yu Huang was surprised. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said speechlessly, the people on the second floor are the same as me. They came from the outside. Is it strange that I know him? Of course. When you entered the divine site, you were just a little divine war god. And this old man was on the second floor as soon as he came in, which means that he must be a semi-divinity realm cultivator. A semi-divinity realm cultivator and a semi-divinity realm cultivator are worlds apart. Isn't it strange that you know him? Yu Huang said. Qin Feiyang said, let me tell you, not only do I know him, but I'm also very familiar with him. Is that so? Yu Huang was startled and asked, then who exactly is this old bastard? How dare he steal something from us? I really want to kill him and his 19 generations of ancestors. Qin Feiyang's face darkened and gave Yu Huang a hard knock on the head. Why did you hit me? Yu Huang said angrily. Qin Feiyang said unhappily, you can scold him, but don't scold his 19 generations of ancestors. Yu Huang said unhappily, I didn't scold you. Why are you so agitated? If you scold his ancestors, that means you're scolding my ancestors too. Don't you think it's related? Qin Feiyang said angrily. His ancestor is your ancestor. What do you mean? Yu Huang was confused. Qin Feiyang looked at the white-haired old man and said with a sigh, he's my great-grandfather. Great-grandfather? Yu Huang was startled and asked, biological? Biological. Qin Feiyang nodded. Yu Huang was stunned. Great-grandfather? Wasn't he family with Qin Feiyang? Wait. Shouldn't you be happy to meet your great-grandfather? But why do you look like you don't like him? Yu Huang looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. It's a long story. Although he's my relative, I don't have a good relationship with him. That's why I didn't go out to meet him, Qin Feiyang said. What's going on between you two? One is your great-grandfather, and the other is your great-grandson. Why are you acting like your enemies? Yu Huang was quite depressed. Once, when I learned that my great-grandfather was still alive, I was very happy, but when Qin Feiyang spoke up to hear, his words stopped abruptly, and there was a strand of sorrow that couldn't be dispersed between his brows. But what? Yu Huang asked. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and said with a faint smile, I don't want to talk about these things anymore. When you have time, you can ask Fatso and the others. All right. Yu Huang nodded. Outside. That's right. The white-haired old man was Emperor Hong. The fierce battle between one man and one beast had already entered its climax. Although Emperor Hong had stepped into the war god realm, and the battle sword in his hand was comparable to the divine phoenix blade, Wu Jiao's strength was not inferior to him at all. The power of that reverse scale was also on par with the battle sword. Clang. Rumble. One man and one beast were constantly injured in the fierce battle. The tree of good fortune is a rare treasure of heaven and earth. You're just a beast. What qualifications do you have to occupy such a treasure? Emperor Hong snorted coldly. Roar. Accompanied by a deafening dragon roar. A huge divine dragon roared out from behind. This world was suddenly shrouded in a mighty dragon aura. Wu Jiao's eyes suddenly had a trace of fear. As a flood dragon, it was born to be afraid of divine dragons. This was a kind of instinct and had nothing to do with strength. And the battle soul that Emperor Hong summoned was a 5-clawed golden dragon. Its body was like a mountain ridge, and its eyes were like stars. A strong dragon aura covered the sky and earth. Emperor Divine Prison. Following closely, Emperor Hong opened his mouth and shouted. His words were law. A huge domain instantly appeared. Wu Jiao was immediately imprisoned in the domain, unable to move at all. Yu Huang said in surprise, his innate ability, why is it also the Emperor Divine Prison? Not only us, even my father's innate ability is also the Emperor Divine Prison. This may have something to do with our bloodline. Qin Feiyang said. It must be related to your bloodline. Otherwise, how could you all activate such innate abilities? Yu Huang said with certainty. Emperor Hong took a step forward, standing above the 5-clawed golden dragon's head against the wind. Like an emperor descending to the world, he looked down at Wu Jiao condescendingly and said, Submit to this old man, and I'll spare your life. In your dreams. Wu Jiao roared, divine power rolling out, bombarding the Emperor Divine Prison crazily. However, the Emperor Divine Prison was indestructible. No matter what method Wu Jiao used, he couldn't break the shackles of the Divine Prison. How can it be so strong? Wu Jiao's eyes were filled with disbelief. Quickly submit. Emperor Hong shouted. An astonishing emperor's aura rushed towards Wu Jiao. At this moment, Emperor Hong seemed to have returned to the past, looking down on the common people and controlling all things in the world. Domineering, majestic. Under the pressure of the emperor's aura, Wu Jiao couldn't control his body and slowly lay down in the void. Even Wu Jiao can't resist at all. This great-grandfather of yours is also quite a terrifying person, Yu Huang said in shock. Isn't that nonsense? Do you know his other identity? The son of the ancestor, Qin Feiyang said. What? Yu Huang was taken aback and said in surprise. He said he is Qin Beishan's son. Qin Feiyang nodded. No wonder. It said that a tiger father will not beget a dog son. As the son of Emperor Qin, how can he be a commoner? Yu Huang sighed. Suddenly his eyes flashed and he said with a smile. Since you guys don't get along, then now, we can't watch him subdue Wu Jiao. Emperor Hong's strength was already terrifying enough. If he let him subdue Wu Jiao, wouldn't it be like adding wings to a tiger? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked suspiciously. What do you want to do? Aren't you asking the obvious? This emperor doesn't believe that with your brain, you can't guess what this emperor is thinking right now. Yu Huang rolled his eyes at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile. Since you said so, then let's go out and play with him. I knew you would agree. Yu Huang laughed and took out the ancient castle. Boom. The power of one man and one beast immediately rushed towards the ancient castle. Outside, Wu Jiao had been forced to lie down in the void by Emperor Hong's emperor's aura. There were 10,000 unwillingness in its heart. However, no matter what it did, it couldn't get rid of the oppression of the emperor's aura. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.